final stop of the 2022 NHRA Western Swing delivers us to the drag strip, dropped smack in the middle of an evergreen forest outside of Seattle, Washington. Pacific Raceways has been the scene of some of the NHRA's most impactful, surprising, and downright wild moments. The massive trees have stood guard over this facility forever, and they'll finally get their branches and needles rattled again by nitro-burning engines for the first time since 2019. This environment is one where prodigious performance is not just possible, it is expected. But what if those trees could talk? They'd tell tales of salty veterans nearly achieving the impossible.
Break has got the break of a lifetime, and he smokes the tires.
They'd smile and remember the earliest triumphs in careers which would end up spanning the decades.
That Cruz Pedregon is, watch him. He's an up-and-comer. He's a good one. I raced with his father.
They'd speak in excited tones about the future greats they helped launch into the drag racing stratosphere.
Ron caps a stellar job to bring that team its first ever.
And they'd pause to remind us that they're far from done in helping to create magical moments.
John Forrest for the 150th.
Put the brooms away. Matt Hartford just beat Greg Anderson.
Austin Brock collects his first career victory.
Yes, if these trees could talk, the stories would be magnificent. And it is both their good fortune and ours that on this day, we add to that canon of tales with the fastest race cars on the planet. The end of the NHRA Western Swing is the start of a new chapter at Pacific Raceways. The return of the Northwest Nationals is coming up next on Fox. And it will happen in one of the most beautiful parts of the country. That's Mount Rainier. Its snow-covered top, a place that racers and crew chiefs have been looking at longingly, waiting, hoping for a reprieve from the heat that has assaulted this racetrack for days. The Space Needle in Seattle, an iconic piece of architecture here in this beautiful part of the nation. It is the NHRA's Western Swing's conclusion, and we have begun in Brownsburg, Indiana. We went to Denver a couple of weeks back. It seems like a month ago now. Then it was last weekend in Sonoma, California. We saw some of the most backbreaking performances of the entire year at sea level, and then 755 miles north here to Pacific Raceways in Kent, Washington, just outside the city of Seattle. 3,104 grueling miles of high-performance, high-speed drag racing fun. It is a one-way trip on the Western Swing, like these fans making the one-way trip into the gates here at Pacific Raceways. They are filing in on a Sunday to see what they know will be a great, great day of straight-line competition at these NHRA flavor-packed Northwest Nationals for the first time here since 2019. Welcome, everybody, to the broadcast booth here at Pacific Raceways. I'm Brian Lones, joined by Tony Pedregon, the two-time NHRA Nitro Funny Car World Champion. And look, the Western Swing is a three-act play in drag racing. William Shakespeare used to write his plays in three acts. You introduce the characters like we did in Denver. Then you have a conflict, and you work to that crescendo like we did in Sonoma. And the conflict is resolved here in Seattle today under very challenging conditions.
Well, and that conflict is the heat, and it's not just any heat. It's 95-degree weather, which puts the racetrack surface at 140 degrees. However, the teams did adapt nicely, quickly during qualifying. However, they will get a little bit of a surprise because first round kicks off earlier in the day. Along with that comes a better density altitude. That means more power, but they have the racetrack to go with it. But here we are ending the three-race swing, and everybody wants it pretty bad.
Let's talk more about that density altitude that Tony just mentioned. It will be a critical factor over the course of this day. It is a measurement of the weather, and it is a measurement of how engines can make horsepower. It is combining factors like air temperature, humidity, and the physical altitude we have above sea level. And Tony, we can talk about maybe good, better, best when it comes to density altitude, or better, worse, and worst. We see all three over the course of the Western Swing.
Well, when you factor in the humidity and the temperature and the barometric pressure, it spits out a number. The lower the number, the better the air. And of course, cooler air carries a lot more oxygen, allows these tuners to make more power. It comes free.
We will see the first round of eliminations happen in very close to that ideal 1,500-foot level. By the time we get done, it'll be up over 3,000 feet. And, Tony, we're going to kick it off with Top Fuel Dragsters.
Well, this Top Fuel machine has that trademark look. You can see the driver is placed directly in front of the engines. We'll see two different designs. This open cockpit area along with a closed cockpit, no aerodynamic benefit, and you can see the launch 0 to 120 miles per hour in less than 1 second.
And Brittany Force has been doing just that, has been on an incredible run, culminating with her win in Sonoma last weekend. This is a grand display of performance for both drivers in both teams. Top Fuel Final, Sonoma Nationals. Now, Brittany Force 033 in the Christmas tree. And Brittany goes 3.709 at 335.48 miles an hour to put an exclamation point on what was one of the most fantastic weekends of Top Fuel performance in history.
This is a big win. Always wanted to win here, and we finally pulled it off.
It is one thing when Brittany Force's team is handed the conditions they were handed last weekend by Mother Nature and performed the way they did. Tony, it is wholly another when they were given the challenging conditions and annihilate the field.
Brian, over the years, we've seen some very impressive runs. This has to be one of them. It just goes to show you the depth, the talent, the ability, the cojones of a crew chief to dial up this kind of performance with the pressure that they had going into this last session.
Last year was a season we mentioned the fact that this team hit a lot of batting practice home runs, meaning they qualified number one with consistency, but translated it into very few race wins. In fact, just a single one. This year, the worm has turned. They have qualified first 5 times, and they have won 4 times. Jamie Howe is with Brittany Force.
Brittany Force regained the Top Fuel point lead in Sonoma. She's also the #1 qualifier for the 5th time this season. But Brittany, bigger than that is the fact that it doesn't matter what conditions we run in right now. This team is able to perform. How does that change race day for you?
That's really promising for this team because in the past we always struggled in the heat, and that was typically race day, and that would always hold us back. But now we've seemed to figure out this car in the warmer conditions, which is, really gives us confidence going into race day. We're coming off a win. We'd love to do it here at the Flavor Pack Northwest Nationals. And we're feeling confident about today. We're going in from the #1 spot.
Famed pro modified drag racer and notable smart Alex Stevie Fast Jackson likes to talk about the gap. Look at the gap that Brittany created yesterday. A 66/100th of a second differential between the #1 and 2 qualifiers in Top Fuel is the single largest one, and it ties it rather, of the last 19 years. And Brittany Force was the one who did it in both instances. Now, that being said, we got to talk about a couple of other cars that performed well, except for the fact that they were just kind of blown into the weeds. Sean Langdon's cars making laps.
Well, consistency is part of the game, horsepower, but for Sean Langdon, as well as some other teams, they have been able to make progress of a kind. They are able to get down to negotiate these extremely hot conditions. We're going to see plenty of it beyond that second round today.
Antron Brown and Tony Schumacher, who have been mired in inconsistent performances, have suddenly shown signs of life.
Well, Antron Brown is one of those other cars. They are not going to make the kind of power that we talked about Brittany Force. However, when it comes to slipping the clutch and maneuvering on a racetrack with the heat waves coming off of it, they were able to do it very well this weekend.
We get a super slow-mo look here at Antron Brown's launch. And we look at the qualifying order positions 2 through 6, and that is a log jam. 381.9 for Torrance at #2. Sean Langdon varying only by a couple hundredths of a second, going to #6 to Sean Langdon. #5 on that list is the man you see on the screen with Antron Brown, and Jamie Howe's with him in the pits.
Antron Brown and this Matco team are the #5 qualifiers heading into race day, but they made 2 solid qualifying passes, both of which came in the heat of the day. Antron, there's been a turning point for this team. What's different this weekend?
Just get more runs, get more data, Jamie. And Denver showed Brian Karate and Mark Oswald and his team what we need to do. And we've just been working really hard on it, capitalize it, and we couldn't get it all figured out in Sonoma, but we're starting to get it figured out. And it's a breath of fresh air. The team is gelling well together. It took us 12 races in the season, but we're starting to hit our stride at the right time, and I like our chances today for sure.
And well, he should. That car is running better than it has all season as we look at the first round of Top Fuel Eliminator. Josh Hart and Clay Millick in a big matchup. Antron Brown and Leah Pruitt is huge, and Tony on the right side. How about that Justin Ashley, Austin Brock showdown?
Brian, they're so evenly matched. It's like showing up at a party and wearing the same shirt. But take a look at Sean Langdon going up against Mike Salinas, who did not qualify in the top half of the field.
Well, Tony, in the words of the great Max Lane, let's get it on as we have Top Fuel dragsters here, Clay Millican and Josh Hart, firing their race cars. The R&L Carriers Top Fueler for Hart. And this, the Clay Millican machine, the Denso onboard camera, is part of that Parts Plus Summit Racing Equipment team. This is a round that Clay Millican needs to win. He sits in 10th place right now with Antron Brown trailing him by a fairly significant margin. But Antron's waiting in the wings and he doesn't want to give up any ground.
Brian, when you see them squirt fuel in that injector to start the car, it's not nitromethane, which is what the cars burn. It is gasoline. Gasoline ignites the engine much easier than nitromethane. Burnouts complete as the fans continue to stream into the grandstands here at Pacific Raceways.
Tony, we talk about these two drivers. They are among the elite as far as reaction times in this category. Clay Milligan leading the class with an 0.56 average. Josh Hart not far behind with an 0.64. All of that is well and good, but where these two teams have both struggled is making consistent runs on race days.
Yeah, right now Josh Hart is the better of the two. Of course, he is in the number 8 position, racing the number 9 qualifier. Does have lane choice. I don't think lane choice is going to be a factor during this race. If we just go back to 1 week ago, the first two pair of top fuel dragsters that we saw ran identical times. It came down to the starting line reaction time. This could well be the case again.
The trend for both teams has been downward over the course of this Western swing. A semifinal finish for Hart in Denver, a second-round loss for Hart in Sonoma, California. For Clay Milligan, it was a second-round finish in Denver and a first-round loss in Sonoma. No one wants to leave the Western swing with a sour taste in their mouth from a round 1 loss. Here we go. A great side-by-side finish to this run. At the finish line stripe, it will be Josh Hart, 3:75.9. A performance drag race with an 0.61 light, and it is a losing 3:79 for Clay Milligan. Better than they ran all weekend for both cars.
Brian, we talked about this performance in the Open because this is the best racetrack that they have had all weekend, and they put up some pretty good times, some very consistent times, but this duplicates the Brittany Force impressive run that she made in that last qualifying run. A 3.75 seconds, both of them in the 3.7 range, but it was Josh Hart getting off the starting line first, slowly pulling away from Clay.
The Denso onboard view there for Clay Milligan, an unfortunate view for Milligan as he saw the R&L Carriers logo out of the left side of his cockpit, and Josh Hart will take this victory by nearly 0.5 of a single second. And Josh Hart reverses the course of that negative trend he has had over the course of the last couple of races. Good news for them. Leah Pruitt, left side of your screen. It is the Sparkling Ice Top Fuel dragster out of the Tony Stewart Racing Team. A little smoke emanating from the left-hand side of the engine there as she backs up. A 9-2 round record against Antron Brown in the first round. I would not have expected that as she makes her way back. For Antron Brown, he is the better performing of these two cars, having made his best run, Tony, in the heat of a Sunday afternoon at 383.
Well, Brian, now that we see this swing in temperature and the improvement on the racetrack, I've got to think that this is going to favor Leah. Even though she did not qualify near as well as Antron, you go back over the last weekend, the weekend before, when they were able to win the race in Denver, we're close to sea level, not near the elevation. However, this is a car that has been performing very well under similar conditions.
Brad Mason stands to the left of the engine. Of course, he made his best run on a Saturday afternoon that was a high heat situation. Next to former teammate Tony Schumacher, and of course, he is next to former DSR teammate Leah Pruitt now. Familiar faces, one has to get to the finish line first. E3 side for Antron, Toyota side for Leah. Reaction times nearly identical. A great side-by-side drag race. And at the finish line stripe, it's Pruitt. 378-1 at 325. Tony, the 370s. A place only one car could get to or falling out of the sky today. Antron is eliminated.
It is raining performance, and we talked about lane choice being a disadvantage or an advantage, and that's not the case. We've seen pretty much every car go down each lane equally as impressive, but it was Leah Pruitt first off the starting line, not by much, but Antron Brown is going to look at his performance and his reflexes off the starting line. There are no redos in this sport, but Antron Brown let one slip away by not getting the jump off of Leah.
For Brown, it is the 8th time in 9 races. His day ends in the first round of competition on a Sunday morning. When we come back, round 1 of Top Fuel Eliminator will continue in this gold and blue monster known as the Flavor Pack Top Fuel Dragster, as driven by Brittany Force, will be coming around the bend to the fear and consternation of everybody else in the category. Stay with us. Top Fuel Eliminator is off to a flying start here in Seattle on Sunday.
The Flavor Pack, NHRA Northwest Nationals on Fox, is sponsored by Flavor Pack. Premium frozen vegetables and fruits. Farmer owned. Nature grown.
Beautiful Mount Rainier as we get a look here. It is Frank Teagues of Flavor Pack. Frank looking on at the car, one of the 2 cars he sponsors, Montana Brands and Rocky Mountain Twist, another of his operations, but it is the Flavor Pack colors this weekend. We take a look at our Top Fuel ladder presented to us by Lucas Oil, and we see Josh Hart and Leah Pruitt have both advanced the 8 and 12 qualifiers, stopping number 9 and number 5, respectively. Jim Maroney, the Northwest Cornwell Tool Dealer sponsorship on the side of his Arizona-based Top Fuel dragster, American Flowtech, also part of his operation. Maroney's first career round win came over Brittany Force in 2018 at Denver, and you can't count this guy out. He averages in the 50s on the tree. The problem is after the tree is where Brittany averages the lowest elapsed time in the category.
Well, she's got to be a big favorite based on what she did yesterday in that last qualifying run. And right now the conditions are a lot more like they were just a week ago when she dominated in Sonoma.
Maroney and Force both pre-staged. A huge starting line advantage for Maroney, and then Brittany Force runs off into a beautiful northwestern morning. 3:74.2, low ET of the meet, 332.43 miles an hour. Should we have expected anything less?
No, I think that's good racing. I think it's good strategy. The way that they approach that, I'm sure they could have run quicker. They may call on that power, but for Frank Teagues that was watching, he is a brave individual. These cars, when two drivers go wide open throttle on the starting line, it is literally a small earthquake. It measures a 3 on the Richter scale.
We watch again here the slow motion replay. You can see the chassis reacting to the initial hit of the throttle. And it's an interesting thing to think about, Tony. You've experienced this a million times, but the idea that these cars accelerate with more G-force in the middle of the racetrack than they do off the starting line.
Yeah, and a common question that I was always asked, is it as loud when you're in the car? And it actually isn't. It's just like being in an airplane. When you hear the engines from the outside, it's a lot louder, and really the driver is always ahead of the noise.
Now let's go to the top end of the racetrack. Jamie Howe is with Leah Pruitt.
And as the number 12 qualifier, this team struggled yesterday getting all the way down the racetrack with the spin of the tires. Did not have that issue today, making your best run. How does that help your chances now as we go in rounds?
Absolutely. Getting that baseline here is fantastic for us, but overall that run really stands out in so many ways. For our Sparkling Ice Dodge team to go up against Antron, who has phenomenal success at this track with that team, and we're tight in points and everything counts right now, and we discovered some new things with our program last night that we think have been haunting us for a while, so I have more confidence than anything right now, and both Antron and I were in there as shallow as possible trying to get our best ETs for round 2, and that's what we're focused on right now.
Leah's going rounds again, trying to recapture the Denver Magic. Right side of your screen, that is Scott Palmer. Left side of your screen, that is Tony Schumacher, the Maynard Family Foundation Skag Power Equipment Okuma Top Fuel Dragster. In this week's E3 Encyclopedia, we talk about the big news of drag racing this week, and that's the fact that Tony Schumacher is no longer racing for DSR. He's racing for the Maynard family.
In a move that became official just this week, Maynard Family Racing is now the majority owner of what used to be Don Schumacher Racing's Top Fuel program. Tony Schumacher remains in the seat, but Joe, you and your wife, Kathy Maynard, now at the head of this program. First off, what remains the same?
Everything for the time being. This is a heritage of winning, a legacy of winning. We simply need to maintain that legacy and maybe create a little bit of our own going forward. We're fans first. I think that's a big deal, the way we treat everybody. We're big fans of Tony and of the team.
Under the banner of Don Schumacher, there are 366 national event wins, 19 championships. Tony, what stamp do you think Maynard Family can make on this program?
Well, I think what sold the whole program was that they wanted to merge with my dad. Joe and Kathy said, we're going to bring you back. We want to be your sponsors, but ultimately we want to own some of this car, whether it's a little bit or a lot. And I think a lot of people out here just saw the excitement. I wanted to be part of it. My dad's still involved, and he always will be. He was, we started this team together, so exciting news.
Joe, I know you and Kathy come into this with a family business mindset. So what are the long-term goals for the program?
I expect I'll be out here at least 10 more years. I mean, doing what I do. My son is sitting right over there. You can bet he's kind of heir apparent to this. So we would like for this to be a long-term family business that grows. First thing we want to do is be a championship contender, get Tony back where he rightfully belongs. And then when that's set, if the opportunity arises and there's another car, I think we would be more than happy to entertain that.
Tony, for you in the seat, with that backing behind you now, how close do you think this program is to getting back to the winning ways?
Well, I think the first 7 races were awful, but forget about the numbers. The car's running good, and our job is to go out there and get into that top 10. We got 4 races to go. I'm about to fight. Joe's about to fight. Kathy's about to fight. We're going to earn our way back into that top 10, go out for that championship.
A big story this week, that is Joe Maynard Jr., and his grandson, also part of this operation, his name, Shelby. And yes, in fact, he is named after Carroll Shelby. That's how deep into the motorsports world this family is. Across the racetrack is Scott Palmer, the everyman of Top Fuel Drag Racing, here with his car, as well as that of Alex Laughlin. Palmer took the fight to Schumacher on the starting line, and Schumacher absolutely caves in an engine, it looked like, at the top end. He goes 385.2 and only 294. That was a sickly patient by the time it got to the finish line.
Yeah, we'll get another look at this, but Scott Palmer was really doomed from the start. When he went wide open throttle, he only had 7 cylinders, and these tuners try to deliver so much fuel volume into these motors. Occasionally, one of those cylinders will flood the spark plug and no longer fire. But here's the damage from Tony Schumacher. You can see the car accelerating. You can see the raw fuel coming out. Now, his car lost that cylinder. That cylinder quit firing just at the halfway point. Right there, you can see the raw fuel coming out. And then comes the engine damage. Right there, you can see the pulse of the firing order. And there's so much cylinder pressure because of the imbalance of the engine. It's trying to push the gasket out that is between the engine block and the cylinder head.
Tony Schumacher has just passed Antron Brown for 11th place in the points. And that will be meaningful when we see these countdown spots. You cannot be that far back. Now, you'll notice we have the Capco Contractors Top Fuel Dragster on the starting line. You'll notice that there is no dragster on the other side, and that is because Ron Smith, the local racer from Washington State, did a burnout, and in the process of doing a burnout, fully lubricated the left-hand side of the drag strip.
Yeah, Brian, I think when they put this car to bed last night, it might have been leaking. And for the life of me, I cannot figure out. The valve cover is one of the easiest parts to install on one of these engines, yet somebody didn't tighten it properly.
So, in a heads-up maneuver, the Capco guys didn't start their car. They waited. It was been a long cleanup. But now they'll attack the right lane by their lonesome. And Torrance 379.4 at 324 miles an hour. Once again, we see another 370.
Yeah, Steve Torrance, that'll put him right in the thick of things. And during that delay, I saw Richard Hogan adjust a few things, potentially slow it down as the temperature on the track continues to increase.
So Steve Torrance moves on to round number 2 as he continues to seek his first win of this 2022 campaign. Does so in fine fashion. When we return, we will be coming back with the continuation of round 1 of Top Fuel. Doug Coletta's ready to rock and roll. He is in his happy place inside the cockpit. Justin Ashley is biding his time until he's able to attack the drag strip as well. Don't go anywhere. Always plenty of pageantry to start an NHRA Camping World National event, but this weekend we had a big boy come over the top. This is a C-17 Globemaster coming out of Lewis McCord Airfield in Tacoma, Washington. And Tony, you want to talk about horsepower? The 4 engines on this plane, each of them creating 40,000 pounds of thrust. The maximum takeoff weight of that plane, more than 500,000 pounds with cargo. Mac Tools, Doug Coletta knows a whole lot about aircraft. He is the 3rd winningest driver on the Western Swing, behind Tony Schumacher and Antron Brown. And he will be taking on Alex Laughlin, driving the Haviland Oil Top Fuel dragster that is tuned and owned by Scott Palmer. Palmer's been eliminated. We'll find out if any of the tuning tricks that he has applied to this car can hang with Doug Coletta. And they're going to go down to the wire here at the top end. It is Coletta. Look at this. 383.7, 322 miles an hour. A nice run for Doug, his best of the weekend. And for Alex Laughlin at 385.6, a very game effort.
Right, a very close race, but for Doug Coletta, a little bit of insurance off of the starting line, getting Alex Laughlin by about 0.02 of a second, and that padded his ability to outperform him on the racetrack as well.
Doug Coletta will face Leah Pruitt next round. Pruitt will have lane choice. We watch again. Laughlin had one of his better reaction times of the season. This is 5th race of the year. And for Doug Coletta, it was a 65 reaction time. One of the great attributes of his driving career is that consistency. And you'll see our Lucas Oil finish line camera. The Mac Tools car by half a car length over a streaking 315 mile an hour Alex Laughlin. Now we go to the top end as Jamie Howe is with Steve Torrance.
Well, after the delay at the starting line, plus Steve Torrance feeling under the weather, you were sitting in that car for a while. Steve, how difficult is it as the driver to get yourself up to have to still run down the racetrack?
You know, that was a very odd first round. Oiling track down before we ever started the car, but you got to give props to Ron Smith and that whole team. I've been coming here for years, and that guy's always here, so I'm a big fan of Ron Smith. But those Capco boys and that Toyota dragster, we just stayed focused, and I mean, I'll tell you, when you're under the weather, you really got to concentrate even more. And so we're doing the best we can. We'll see if we can go some more rounds today, but we need to get that Capco car in the winner's circle.
Tony, the sniffles could be a bad sign. We all remember the famous Michael Jordan fever game, right? It could be the Steve Torrance fever race as we see Sean Langdon and Mike Salinas on the starting line. Current Top Fuel points entering round 1 eliminations today show Brittany Force leading Salinas by 15 points after her qualifying effort gave her a little bit of cushion there. Justin Ashley and Steve Torrance third and fourth, significantly back, and then you get the fifth. Josh Hart really fighting to maintain that number 5 spot, and he's doing it to try to stay ahead of Sean Langdon for maximum efficiency and the strongest entry point he can have into the countdown. Now, Mike Salinas' car being pushed back to the starting line by the crew. That is 100% legal. There's nothing untoward about that. Crew chief standing here, Rob Flynn.
I don't know if there was an issue with the reverser. It does seem that he has it in the forward gear, but occasionally some of the crew members will roll the car just so they can eliminate some of the friction out of the clutch. They don't want the driver applying the clutch to back it up, to keep the clutch cool. The cooler, the more heat they can keep out of it during the run, the better.
In the raw performance side of things, Mike Salinas carries a typical advantage. Now, Langdon did out-qualify him, and Langdon's car, and there's a problem with Mike Salinas' car. They are struggling, and likely it tends to be at that part of the car, perhaps a linkage issue with the clutch. We're going to find out what happens here. Uncertainty for Salinas. He's not going to be able to stage the race car.
He's going to get timed out. The car is not rolling forward when he lets the clutch out.
And Sean Langdon, straight down the racetrack, a 379.6 at 321 miles an hour. Opinion-wise, Tony, Langdon's car was so consistent in the heat, we were questionable whether he'd be able to get around Salinas in round 1, and he just did it.
Well, that would have been a tough number to get around. However, I did think that these conditions would have favored Mike Salinas. I think they could have easily plugged in a 375, 376, which would have dispatched that Sean Langdon run. We'll never know. The problem set in after the burnout for Mike Salinas. It didn't seem like he could get the car in reverse. The crew pushed the car back. He was trying to get it back in forward gear, so they rolled him up to the pre-stage light, but that's a very costly mistake. They'll never know what would have happened.
And just to explain what timing out means, what it means is when one car is fully staged, the other car has a maximum of 7 seconds to get in and go down the racetrack. If you don't get in within 7 seconds, the red light comes on. So Sean Langdon continues to stack up round wins. Austin Prock, the Montana brand's Rocky Mountain Twist machine. Joe Barlam. Right side of the engine, the left side, or behind the car, I should say, is Ron Tobler. In 2019, his first and only thus far career win coming against Steve Torrance in the final round.
Well, I'm sure he'd like to forget all about that reaction time, but thank goodness for him that it was Steve Torrance losing traction. Doesn't matter how it happened. They'll only remember that this was the place of that first win. And how he got on the rear spoiler of the car, I still want to know.
Here come the burnouts. First, for Austin Prock. Justin Ashley going to heat the tires of Phillips Connect Vita C Energy Shot Toyota Top Fuel Dragster. We're going to talk more about Austin Prock. We're going to talk with Austin Prock. We're going to talk with Ron Tobler in this week's Cornwall Crew Chief Confidential.
For Austin Prock, his first win in Top Fuel came right here at Pacific Raceways, Austin, back in 2019. What do you remember from that day now?
I remember it was one of the best days of my life. Getting a Top Fuel win in my first rookie season was a huge accomplishment, and I think we can do that again today. I think we have a great car. We made gains every qualifying session, and the fans really remember that race.
It was just a couple of months after that the global pandemic hit. How did that affect you personally?
It was tough. You know, you go from living your dream to sitting out on the sidelines for almost 2 years. So I'm really happy to be back in the seat, and getting to work with Ron Tobler and Joe Barlam and this whole Montana brand crew again is a dream come true, and I think a win is right around the corner for us.
Ron Tobler, fast forward to this season. You came out of retirement to lead this new Top Fuel program. What growing pains have there been so far?
Well, there's definitely been growing pains on my part. It had been, 15, 16 years since I worked on a dragster. You know, things are a little bit different in those days, from those days until now. But fortunately, some of the funny car stuff kind of transfers over, but it's definitely been a learning experience that people like Joe Barlam and this entire team have helped me grow and learn, and, we hope to keep learning.
As a crew chief, you have 70 national event wins, 30 of those coming in Top Fuel. You have a young driver in Austin Prock. Where can he improve?
Well, I don't see much where he can improve. Mostly the losses have been on us. So, we're just going to continue to work better together as a team, us and our learning curve with running the race car and racing better on Sundays. Usually he's not our worry on Sunday.
Austin is among the most intense young drivers in the sport, but that intensity is matched by Justin Ashley, and the success level is overmatched by Ashley as he has multiple wins on the season already. Within 3,000ths of a second, they leave, and at the finish line stripe, it is Ashley. What a finish to the first round. 378 beats a 379, 11th thou at the finish line stripe.
Well, Brian, we've seen this so many times from the Justin Ashley machine. When that car leaves the starting line, it'll hike the front end up, unlike most of the top fuel cars that we see here. And when it does that, it usually means that the weight distribution is good, the weight balance, the wheel speed initially. It seems like everything is on the mark, and I don't know if you're going to catch him with the amount of power that that car makes. And of course, Austin Propp right there along with him. Only knows if anything faltered on the Justin Ashley machine, it would have been a different story. But a big win, a big advancement into the second round for them.
If Propp had been in the high 50s of reaction time, he would have won the drag race. It came down to that tight a razor-thin margin. What does round 2 look like? It looks pretty scary. Brittany Force, Josh Hart, Doug Coletta, Leah Pruitt, Steve Torrance, Justin Ashley, and Tony Schumacher will take on Sean Langdon. Robert Hight owned the racetrack in Denver, got the job done on the mountain. He will try to get it done in the forest. When we come back, Nitro Funny Cars.
The Flavor Pack NHRA Northwest Nationals on Fox is sponsored by Camping World, making RVing fun and easy since 1966.
Nitro Funny Cars, a whole lot of fun to watch. I'm guessing a whole lot of fun to drive, Tony, but there's nothing easy about them.
The most challenging of all the professional categories to drive due to the short wheelbase combined with the 11,000 horsepower and the driver located just a few feet behind that nitro-burning engine. Highly aerodynamic bodies, and in 95-degree weather we've seen this weekend, we've already surpassed speeds of 320 miles per hour.
Bob Taska III has been negotiating the insane heat here very, very well outside of Seattle. He picked up his 10th career victory just 1 week ago in Sonoma, California, and he has carried that momentum like a cannonball into the Flavor Pack NHRA Northwest Nationals, coming into Sunday as the #1 qualifier. The wine chalice in his hand, the smile on his face, and the Wally above his head. He wants all that stuff back this weekend, and in qualifying session 1, he began with a bang.
Well, they picked up right where they left off. It was such an impressive win at Sonoma, but we really started to see this team come out of the mid-season slump that they were in at Denver.
And then all of a sudden we go to qualifying session 3, the hottest conditions, the hottest racetrack, the worst air, and they said, come and get me.
It was the same elapsed time as the first qualifying session, however, maybe a couple of degrees hotter, and this was a more impressive run since they were able to back up what they did in that first qualifying session.
Quickest of the session by a bunch as we get a career snapshot here of Bob Taska III, the 25th funny car driver with 10-plus wins. 4 wins in the last 2 seasons, 3 straight final round appearances, and a #1 qualifier at Seattle. No one can sweep the swing, but Bob Taska III can come very, very close. Jamie Howe was with Bob Taska in the pits.
3 consecutive final rounds coming off of a win. #1 qualifier for the first time this season. Bob Taska, momentum is huge in sports. For you and this team, what does it mean as we approach race day?
Well, there's no question it's huge to have this kind of momentum behind us, but we're taking nothing for granted. 1 round at a time. Every round's a big matchup. We want to get ourselves in a position to go to our 4th final and give us a chance to win.
We take a look now at Matt Hagan, the final qualifying session. And Tony, this is a guy whose seasons began as strong as steel, and like a drag racing announcer, it's gotten kind of soft in the middle.
Well, it does sound like they have been testing, trying some things. There's usually a payoff for that, but when you start slipping in the points, that may not necessarily be the best decision.
We watch his 3rd qualifying run, which they did get the car on the racetrack, but they have not found that premier performance. And who does he have to race in the first round? He's got to race John Force. We look back over the last 4 events, and this has been un-Hagan and Venables-like. Round 2 losses, round 1 losses. It is time to turn the good ship Dodge around in the correct order. Look at this. He was leading the points by 41 coming into Norwalk, and now he trails Robert Hight by 148. In the pit area, Jamie Howe has caught up with Matt Hagan.
4 race days ago, Matt Hagan had a 41-point lead in the Funny Car point standings, but after 2 second-round losses and 2 first-round losses, there's now 148 points separating you and Robert Hight. Monstrous first-round matchup. With the deficit that you're at right now, what do you have for John Force?
Well, I don't know. I think we got to figure out what this heat's got for us. I mean, I'm definitely sweating. I'm just hoping he's sweating a little bit more than I am out there. And, you know, I loved racing John. I love racing Robert, all these cars. I mean, you look at the matchup with Caps and Robert and us and John, it's just going to be a throwdown, you know, basically really dogfight out there today. And I think it's going to be one of those driver's days, you know what I mean, where you're out there pedaling, you know, trying to get the car to the other end, doing whatever it takes. But we got some great fans here. We're going to put on a great show, and I'm going to have some fun doing it.
There's certainly a lot of fans here that are going to get to watch this. Now, when John and Matt face off head-to-head, John has the advantage career-wise, but this is 2022, and right now Matt Hagan leads him 2-0. But when we go into race day, John Force has lane choice. When we think about the last couple of races, though, John Force comes in with this advantage. He's coming off of a final round appearance just last week in Sonoma. He went to the semifinals back in Denver, so momentum is certainly on his side in this matchup. John, I know you love racing Matt Hagan. What do you have for him in the first round?
Well, I'm going after him. Our track's been a little tricky. It might be a little cooler here early, so we think we can run some good numbers. But for Peak and Chevrolet and Auto Club and Cornwall, I owe to do my job. And he's a tough character. And but I'm going to go after him, give him everything I got, and I'm going to get the win. That's how I think, because that's how you got to think. But he's a great competitor.
Confidence and respect from John Force as we see our key matchups here in the first round. John Force and Matt Hagan. Height and Caps, Pendragon Wilkerson, Alexander Todd. The matchup we have in the race strip right now is Bob Taska III, that Ford Motorcraft Quick Lane Mustang. Lined up next to Gary Densham, one of the legacy funny car racers in the category, the Midwest Factory Finishes machine for Densham. But for Mr. Bob Taska, it has been a month of Sundays that this guy's been in love with.
Yeah, and it seems that they're going to continue the pace based on how they qualified, how they backed up their first round qualifying effort. And it's not often that we see the number one qualifier opt to be the very first pair. It's usually the third pair, the fourth pair. They want to see what the track conditions are going to be like. But for Bob Taska, part of it is a level of confidence, but the other is as the day progresses, that racetrack surface will start to creep up, and of course the cooler the racetrack, the more grip.
Densham's parachute comes out. Bob Taska III gets to the finish line, 393.9, 323.66 miles an hour. His best run of the weekend. Louis T for funny car of the weekend so far. And I think that was a strategic 393. There's more out there.
Yeah, no low contendere. I mean, this was no contest. Even though Densham got off the starting line first, but a very conservative, as expected for Bob Taska on the starting line, not on the racetrack. I think this car has a very specific range that they feel confident in how they're going to set it up for the run. There's Gary Densham leaving the starting line, and take a look at the rear of the car. Try to envision seeing those rear Goodyears. You can see that lower rocker panel start to rock. The car is more than likely overpowering the track. That rear tire is imbalanced. It's slipping. It's spinning. Well, it seems like it's really struggling. And there's the cylinder on that left bank for Gary Densham, a serious loss of power, but he was watching Bob Taska streak away to the quickest run of the weekend to this point.
For Sean Langdon, a little oddity up at the start line. You went into pre-stage first, but then he got timed out. How difficult is that for you to not red light?
Well, I mean, the thing is when we were backing up, I saw that they were having some issues back by the tree that they started pushing them, so I didn't know if they were having something where it popped into neutral or what, but yeah, I mean, at that point, you're just trying to focus on your own thing. The guys did a great job, giving me a great race car right there. But I was trying not to do anything, out of the ordinary. Obviously, when I was in there for 7 seconds, it kind of changes your perception of trying to how hard you're going to hit the tree. But, fortunately, 379, it's a good run. Give us lane choice for the next round. We can keep going.
It keeps, again, incrementally piling up those round wins. It is the Lascura Complete Mechanical car for Jim Campbell. And as Alexis DeJoria, the Bandero Premium Tequila GR Toyota Supra. Alexis out of the gate first, and at the finish line, Alexis to the finish line first. 3.964 seconds, 320.74 miles an hour. Alexis DeJoria, much like Sean Langdon, they make complete runs, and she is going rounds race after race.
Well, Brian, I don't know if you noticed, but this was one of the higher qualified cars that opted for the left lane. Just goes to show you that there is really not a difference. Most of the cars that had the choice of lanes have been in the right lane. They have been the better car in qualifying, the better car in this first round, and Alexis just proved it and made a very solid run in the effort.
As we continue with Nitro Funny Car Eliminations, John Force and Matt Hagan sit at the ready line, and we will be back in moments to show you this titanic first round matchup. And And as we come back here to Pacific Raceways, we'd be remiss if we did not remember the last time we were here, and John Force completed a long journey to 150 Nitro Funny Car victories. It turned into complete and utter bedlam after this win light came on. He was at the top end. He received both the Wally from this race, and he was handed the Wally from his first win in Montreal, Canada, back in the late 1980s. He then went and scaled a fence, got dragged into the grandstands. They thought he was having a heart attack. I mean, it was all crazy. John Force and Matt Hagan sitting at the ready line now. The Peak Antifreeze and Coolant Chevrolet for Force, and the Dodge Power Brokers SRT Red-Eye Hellcat Charger for Matt Hagan. Had a chance to speak with Dickie Venables last night after qualifying was completed, and he was kind of in a tough spot. He said, you know, we're struggling to get down this hot racetrack. He said, but then I know I got Danny Hood, and Danny's probably going to try to put a 90 in my lap in the first round.
There really has to be so much going on in the minds of both of the tuners, and I think what it comes down to is both of them realize that they have to put their best effort on the racetrack right now. I'm sure that Dickie Venables, the tuner for Matt Hagan, is going to go back to his run book where he has made some good runs under similar conditions. You can throw out what they did in Sonoma because they didn't perform very well, but right now, just 1 week ago, it was John Force coming from the bottom half and taking out Ron Cass. Matt Hagan is hoping to do the same thing to Force because he did not qualify as well.
As we mentioned, Matt Hagan has a singular round win over the course of his last 3 races, something that would be almost impossible to consider the way his season started. 455 career round wins over the course of an incredible career that is absolutely not losing steam here. And for John Force, as he moves the car ahead, you know, we talk about the driver battles all the time, but to me, Tony, it is that next level that the crew chiefs have to kind of discern each other's philosophy. As much as we talk about driver staging, they think about how each other tune these cars.
Well, that's why it is such a team effort. The tuner is going to do his part, make as much power, try to get the car to maintain traction, and it's always interesting to see the game on the starting line if Force decides to roll in like he always does.
Matt Hagan has misfiring cylinders. John smokes the tires, but he's going to leg it through. 427.7, 277, and John Force proving why he can sometimes become Fred Astaire on a gas pedal. That was a pedal job for the ages.
Well, Brian, unfortunately for Matt Hagan, when he left the starting line, he only had 7 cylinders, and these cars, again, unfortunately for them, are equipped with a auto shutoff system. If the engine, the short block, detects too much pant pressure, it will shut the car off. That appears to be what happened. But take a look at a master at work. John Force, bang, losing traction off of the throttle, eases back into it. This is a conditioned response. This is something that only a few drivers can do and do it well, and not too many are as good as John Force. Take a look on the left side of your screen. He's under power. The car loses traction, gets off the throttle. However, the way he got off the throttle wasn't just getting off and getting right back in it. We've seen drivers do that, and the car never recovers traction, regains traction. The car can get sideways, go into the wall. The way Force, the manner that he controlled the throttle is what allowed that car to get to the finish line.
It is the first time John Force has beaten Matt Hagan this year. Let's take a trip back to 1991 and this week's Dodge Tales from the Strip as we get a ride back to the starting line with Tim Wilkerson in the Levi Ray and Schaub Mustang. We're going to talk about Cruz Pedregon. Tony, your brother in 1991, kind of a dream weekend with Larry Minor as he squared off against the Snake in a Top Fuel dragster and got his first professional round win.
Yeah, of course, the opportunity to drive for one of the original super team owners, Larry Minor, that gives you the best equipment, a lot of talent, a lot of tuning talent. And, of course, Cruz really fulfilled the obligations with all that pressure, took on some of the biggest names in the sport.
That audio you heard at the top of our show with Tom the Mongoose McEwen came on that same day after McEwen stopped Cruz in the semifinal round. The Levi Ray and Schaub Mustang of Tim Wilkerson, Summit Racing Equipment, a big part of this program. As we look inside the hot rod, you can see Tim's eyes there. You can see his hand on the brake lever, the other resting on the butterfly steering wheel. For Cruz Pedregon, the Snap-on franchise car, this is a car that is on the span of a 10-week straight tour. NHRA national events, match races. These guys are relentless. They both smoke the tires, and it will be simply Wilkerson on momentum. 445.9 at 214. The first time we've seen that all day.
Yeah, this is what's happening is the track temperature is starting to come up. It's starting to increase, and it's happening fast. And of course, with these shorter wheelbase funny cars, it rears its head. They have to slip the clutch. The degree of difficulty is much harder now. For the Snap-on car, It's very interesting because we saw John Force get off and on the throttle, and take a look at the car spinning the tires. The throttle blades are closed. I'm surprised they didn't open. There they are. He's back on the throttle. I'm going to take a guess and say that the car shut itself off because Cruz was on the throttle. Not sure why the throttle blades closed, but he was out of power, and that allowed Tim Wilkerson to drive around him. Let's take another look, but mostly another listen at this.
That has to be the most uncomfortable silence in the world in the seat of that car.
Yeah, so Tim Wilkerson, he knew his car lost traction, and when he didn't hear Cruz next to him, he opted to get back on the throttle, but I'm going to take a guess and say that the Snap-on car had shut itself off at that point.
Wilkes Warriors are chopping wood up here in the Pacific Northwest. When we come back, we got Ron Capps, we got Robert Hight, and we got some of the biggest names in Nitro Funny Car yet to run.
I would say as a family farming, our greatest reward isn't necessarily financial. The opportunity to grow things that are healthy for people to eat. That I find very rewarding.
And that's why our family only eats flavor pack frozen fruits and vegetables.
Where are you going now, Brittany?
The grocery store. Grandma and Grandpa are coming over for dinner, and we need more flavor pack veggies. Flavor Pack. Farmer owned, nature grown.
The Flavor Pack, NHRA Northwest Nationals on Fox, is sponsored by Toyota. Let's go places.
The Toyota visor cam here for Ron Capps inside his Napa Supra on the starting line at Pacific Raceways. Robert Hight, the points leader in Nitro Funny Car. Matt Hagan wants the world for Ron Capps to win this drag race so he can prevent Hight from getting any further away from his grasp. Capps right now with 923 points, chasing about 70 behind Hagan. You see the two tuners, Dean Antonelli, Jimmy Prock looking across from each other. The Auto Club Chevrolet has been the King Kong of Funny Car over the course of this summer. We'll find out if Ron Capps can knock him off the Empire State Building. Not going to happen here as Capps' car whips the tires at about 330 feet. And Robert Hight, how about you? 391.4, 323 miles an hour.
Well, it was Capps using some of the real estate available on the starting line, so it did appear that he was first off the line. However, when you watch the reaction of both of the cars, it looked like they were about even, but it was Robert Hight and the performance of Robert Hight. So it is getting hot. It's about 5 degrees hotter than the start of the session. That track temperature is starting to creep up, but if you wanted to know if the track's going away, not if you asked Jimmy Prock, the tuner for Robert Hight.
You saw Capps working the wheel to keep that car in the groove, which it was. It simply overpowered the drag strip, and that was Robert Hight's license to fly as he was gone with low ET of the entire Funny Car event so far at 391.4. Earlier today, we got a conversation with Matt Hagan after that round 1 race against John Force.
For Matt Hagan, it is an early day of packing up 3 first-round losses in a row now. As we take a week off, getting ready for Brainerd, what needs to happen to get down the racetrack in this hot conditions?
We need to get our stuff together, that's for sure. 3 first-round losses like that is really unacceptable. We're a better team than that. Our sponsors pay more for that. But at the end of the day, it falls on us as a team, and we just got to do better. But, we knew Force was going to be tough. We're up there pressing. I don't know if Dickie shut me off with a kill switch or if it was a pan pressure switch, but I was just a dead bird in the water right there, so just watching him kind of motor by me. But anyway, all we'll do is we'll go back, work hard, we'll figure out what's going on and get a better game plan for coming out, next couple weeks.
That is the DHL Toyota Supra of J.R. Todd. Body raised. Todd and this team, as we've often talked about, just trying to kind of get a head of steam behind them. They're sitting 7th in the points right now. They have opportunity here. Because of Cruz Pedregon's loss, they can start to chip their way up this top 10 list, put themselves in a better spot in the countdown. For Blake Alexander, it's not really chasing a countdown spot as much as it is chasing race victories. He and Jim Head, the Toronto Auto Service Center Mustang, along with Parts Authority and other supporters there in the starting line. Jim Head tunes the car, Blake Alexander drives it. We have seen Blake Alexander step on the gas in a more acute fashion. His reaction time's getting better race after race. Fathead's eyewear drone cam looking down atop these 2 Nitro Funny Cars. J.R. Todd was 060 on the Christmas tree, and he goes 395.5 at 325 to outrun Blake Alexander's 399. That is a brutally quick reaction time and a quicker 60-foot time than Blake had to boot.
Yeah, a very good solid run for the DHL car, and based off their last qualifying run, I mean, they were been slowly, progressively getting better and better regardless of the temperature, and I'm pretty sure the Robert Height run, that 391, allowed this team to stay on course and to stay aggressive with their setup, and they needed every bit of it.
That car was planted to the racetrack, the body wiggling like a jello mold, which they tend to do at a speed of 325 miles an hour, and John Oberhofer says, we got you, baby. He and Todd Smith will be very happy with that round one result, and they will be competitive with Bob Taskett in round two. Taskett did run 393.9, but to go right down to brass tacks, Tony, if it comes down to a starting line battle, my money's on that guy between he and Bob. And there is Todd making the bend in the DHL Supra. Now let's go to the top end of the racetrack. Jamie Howe is up at the big end.
An impressive 391 with the 4 in the first round of eliminations. You didn't run better than a 4 flat in qualifying. What did the team overcome to be able to get down this hot racetrack?
Well, it's a lot cooler than we raced yesterday. So Jimmy and Chris told me that the Auto Club Chevy had run 390 first round. So they hit it pretty close with a 391. But that 4 flat we ran yesterday was a 134-degree track. And that was pretty impressive. If we can do that now in the next 3 rounds, we'll be looking good. I want to say hi to John Powers at Power Solar.
So Robert Height will take that round win, and this is going to be the chess match. As he mentioned, this rising temperature, rising density, altitude will be the story of the rest of this day in all of our categories. It'll be time to burn gasoline. The Pro Stockers, gear jamming, high winding, big cubic inch V8s, rumbling the treetops here. Greg Anderson, part of that group. We'll see him when we return. Welcome back to Pacific Raceways. This is the Total Seal Tech Talk, an engine seminar held in the pits. A lot of our fans love coming out and learning about the ins and outs of racing engines. The folks at Total Seal and Rodler got this together, and it's great. Lake Speed Jr. and Alan Reinhardt leading the talk, and a lot of great gearhead knowledge shared. Tony, let's talk more about Matt Harford's favorite class, Pro Stock.
With Pro Stock coming up, they are all powered by a big block Chevy engine, electronically fuel injected since 2016, and without the old style hood scoop, the air is rammed into an area just below the front bumper. Equipped with a 1.5-gallon fuel tank, they can burn 3/4 of a gallon in a quarter-mile run. The Sunoco Racing fuel is so specialized, they are sometimes fueled in the staging lanes by the tech department.
Erica Enders has been very specialized this season. She has won 6 times and is on pace to obliterate her previous best mark of 9 wins in a single season. There is not a drag racer in any professional NHRA category that has been more dominant than the woman in the Melling Performance Camaro who picked up a victory last weekend. But another challenger has arisen. Greg Anderson made a final round last week, and in this weekend's qualifying, he has showed that he is no slouch, as he was pound for pound as good and even better than Eric Anders.
Well, Brian, it does appear that Greg Anderson is coming, only he needs to bring hell with him to be able to compete with Erica on the starting line. That has been his only weak point during the season.
That HendrickCars.com Camaro has been flying. Anderson is still seeking win number 100. It has eluded him for this whole season thus far. 13 wins on the swing, 3 runners-up here in Seattle, but more importantly, 3 victories. He's seeking another one, and he's with Jamie Howe.
Certainly lots of good momentum when it comes to racing here in Seattle, but also on the right path now in 2022, coming off of your first final round of the season, #1 qualifier. I caught you looking at the computer already this morning. What kind of race day is stacking up for you?
Well, you know what, the good news is qualifying is going to be a whole lot like race day, and usually you get a big swing from qualifying to race day, completely different setup. This time looks like we can keep the horse just exactly where she's at. She's happy with a hot racetrack, so we don't have to make major changes there. So that's the good news, but bottom line is you still got to execute perfectly, and the driver's got to execute perfectly, and hopefully we can get that done today and find a way to get that 100th win.
Find out if he can get a little help from his friends as well, as we see the Pro Stock ladder presented by Lucas Oil. Anderson will have that solo to start the day. Quadra and Butner. Trey Coughlin Jr. taking on Fernando Quadra, the family patriarch. Christian Quadra and Camry Caruso. We look at the right side. Enders and McGahey, Glennon Hartford, Aaron Stanfield, Mason McGahey, and Kyle Koretsky will take on Derek Kramer. Now we take a look at final round eliminations here. Starting round 1, of course, we have Fernando Quadra Jr., the Corral Boots machine closest to us, and the Johnson's Horsepower Garage Camaro of Bo Butner. And Butner Enders out first with a 004 light, but the car heads to the center line. Tony Quadra Jr. gets the win light.
Well, based on the tire tracks, the black tracks that Bo Butner leaves on the starting line, excessive tire slippage, it caused the car to drive towards the inside. It didn't appear that he was able to pull it back to the center of the lane.
These cars can become highly unstable at speed. They have very little downforce, so he got out of the throttle when he was out of the groove. The Total Seal onboard camera here from Matt Hartford, completing his burnout past the crew members. You notice the Rottler name of the doors. Rottler is a manufacturer of precision machining equipment, and they're a big part of not only the Total Seal Piston Rings car of Matt Hartford, his business as well. They toured the facility. It is a Washington company, and Rottler equipment is used by folks like Tim Wilkerson as well. It is used across the automotive industry. And Tony, is that your LS block getting bored out there?
I hope so. The bigger, the more, the better.
We now see the Rad Torque Systems Camaro of Dallas Glenn backing up to the starting line, who will be racing Mr. Matt Hartford. The Rad Torque System sponsorship announced an extension of 2 years for Dallas Glenn, a minimum of 2 years as it was set on the starting line during a final qualifying action. So that means Dallas Glenn will be comfortably in the seat of a Pro Stock car for the upcoming seasons. And great news for Dallas, but the way this kid drives may be bad news for everybody else.
Yeah, it really is. If you look at the consistency during qualifying, he should be favored in that far lane.
And Glenn in front of friends and family at his home racetrack is 0-15 against Matt Hartford. Hartford's going to hang on his bumper, but it's going to be Dallas Glenn. 661.7 at 206 to Hartford 662.8 at 207. We watch from inside the Total Seal Piston Rings Camaro.
No, Brian, there was a little bit of a staging battle. No driver wanted to go into pre-stage. Finally, Dallas Glenn went in. It almost seemed like it worked against Matt Hartford. He got left at the altar.
Now we have Derek Kramer. They were only able to manage one qualifying run in this car. They had a fuel pump problem. They had a situation where they ran over a rock with the car and a tire went down. The Toyota side for Kramer, Kyle Koretsky, the Lucas Oil Camaro on the E3 Sparkplug side.
Now, Brian, you can see the jump for Kyle Koretsky. He needed every bit of it. And for a driver, that is the ultimate compliment when you see a driver like Kyle that knows he needs to get up to race Derek Kramer.
664.1 beating a 666 by 1 car length. Kyle Koretsky advances onto round number 2. The Tequila Comisario Camaro of young Camry Caruso competing here at the Northwest Nationals for the first time. She never visited Seattle before. And it'll be Christian Quadra backing up the bright orange Mustang on the opposite side of the racetrack. Been a fun season to watch Camry Caruso come along. The high water mark so far, Tony, that final she made at Houston.
Yeah, we're really seeing better performance from all of these Pro Stock cars like we did the Nitro Funny cars, the Top Fuel cars. The density altitude is still better, although that temperature is starting to creep up. What was 114 at the start of the Pro session is now 122 degrees.
For Father Mark saying, keep your head in the game, and another red light for the Quadra family. Christian goes red. Camry Caruso left the starting line second. She was also early, but there's no such thing as a double red light. Christian did it first. He's eliminated despite the fact he ran quicker, a 660 flat.
Yeah, that's a tough way to go out, Brian.
Troy Coughlin Jr. and Fernando Quadra now. The Corral Boots Mustang in green for Quadra, the Jegs.com Camaro for Coughlin. Whoa, boy, 0-13 reaction time for Fernando, stepping up to the plate like his son so often do, but at the finish line, it's Elite Motorsports. Horsepower. You heard it low for the race, 6:59.8, as Coughlin gets the job done driving around Quadra at the finish line.
Brian, if this is a 1,000-foot racetrack, that win would go to Fernando. However, this is quarter-mile stuff here.
Greg Anderson, the Summit onboard camera, his HendrickCars.com Camaro will have no opponent in round 1, an odd number of cars here this weekend. We take a look back 1 week ago. He made a final round, Tony. It was his finest race of the year so far.
Yeah, pretty tough competition. You can see Greg Anderson just overpowering his opponent. He had it all on this day. He just didn't have quite enough in that final round.
We watched Steve Graham disappear that Summit onboard roof camera. Then round 2, clutch out, gear banging. Now listen for the rev limiter. Right there, a couple of 100 feet before the finish line, the car runs into the 10,500 RPM chip if they have it geared properly. Now we ride in the car against Kyle Koretsky. 2, 3, 4, 5. Little steering input there late in the run, and again that stutter when the car runs into the rev limiter. Anderson made his way to the final round and fell short to Erica Enders. Speaking of Miss Eric Anders. There she is, the Melling Performance Camaro, qualifying second this weekend, only behind Greg.
Yeah, this is the best view for Greg Anderson. And what he's telling himself is, if I can only do this today.
On a solo, reaction time irrelevant. He goes through the finish line stripe, 6:59.9 at 2:07.78. The man has a horse that can run, seemingly has a confidence level that is rising by the round. And a developing story here in Pro Stock for Greg Anderson. Now it's Aaron Stanfield and Mason McGahey. Harlow Salmons of Odessa, the sponsor for McGahey. Stanfield, JC3 Energy. 200s, Tony. In this category, that's often enough. 200s advantage for Mason McGahey, but it is not going to be enough. Horsepower rules today. 6.605 beats a 6.62.
Well, it usually wins out, especially in this Pro Stock class, and everything the driver does on the starting line is essential, but not quite enough of a starting line jump for Mason McGahey.
The burnout for Eric Anders, the Melling Performance Camaro. Now let's get to the top end of the racetrack as Fernando Quadra Jr. is with Jamie Howe.
Fernando Quadra Jr. going to the second round, still outside of the top 10s in the point standings. How do these round wins help motivate this team and give you that little boost that you guys need to get in there?
Oh, they definitely help a lot. I mean, of course, the ultimate goal is to be in the top 10. I mean, pretty much for every driver that is here competing the whole tour. And these rounds really do help a lot, especially in confidence for me and the team. So it's been really good. Thank you.
Always smiling, the Quadra boys, as we now see Chris McGahey lined up next to Erica Anders. No love lost between these two. Erica a slim 9,000ths advantage off the starting line. She will translate that into more than a car length at the stripe. She's happy. 6:59.3 moves here to round two. We see Greg Anderson will take on the smiling Fernando Quadra Jr., Troy Coughlin Jr., and Camry Caruso. Then it'll be Anders and Glenn. That's a big one. Aaron Stanfield and Kyle Koretsky. We mentioned Camry Caruso. Let's mention her again. She's at the top end with Jamie Howe.
For Camry Caruso, she gets the first round win light, but it was a red light start. You just weren't as bad as what Christian Quadra was. There was a lane swap going on. You're still a rookie driver. How do you manage all of these challenges at the start line?
I'll be honest, I actually like the left lane, so I was completely fine when they took the right. I was like, whatever, that's good with me, but I'm not usually red, so that was exciting. But I'm just happy we have the first round losing off our back, and I'm ready to put the car in the winner's circle today. Thank you, guys.
She's ready. The flavor pack setup has been busy all day and all weekend long. Fans swinging in there to check out interactive displays. They got the cornhole out. You can have a lot of fun here at this flavor pack Northwest Nationals, not only watching race cars, but also interacting in the pits. When we come back, we'll get back into burning nitromethane. We are back at Pacific Raceways. This is Steve Huff and his electric dragster as part of this weekend's Pep Boys EV exhibition. Huff is chasing his own speed record of 202.8 miles an hour. That's 202.8 over the course of a quarter-mile run. It is the fastest electric dragster in the world. He has flirted with his record a couple of times this weekend, but has not broken that record yet. Pep Boys is dedicating a lot of resources to electric vehicle service, and so they are supporting electric vehicle drag racing. And these exhibitions at our Camping World Series national events are very, very cool to watch. Now we have our K&N key storylines over the course of this day so far. Mike Salinas timed out and lost in round one, had a problem with the engagement of the clutch or the engagement of forward gear in the car. John Force beat Matt Hagan, his third straight round one loss for Hagan. In Pro Stock, the favorites all won in the first round, and Eric Anders was the quickest car on the property. And now we transition into round two of Top Fuel Eliminator. This is Tony Schumacher, the Maynard Family Foundation. Skag Power Equipment, Top Fuel car. Okuma on that machine as well. And the DHL Top Fueler of Sean Langdon. Coming into this run, Sean Langdon holding a significant performance advantage, 379 to Schumacher's 385 in the first round. We take a look at our pairings here in this Lucas Oil competition ladder. Brittany Force will take on Josh Hart. It'll be Coletta taking on Leah Pruitt. Doug Coletta, of course. Steve Torrance, Justin Ashley, and the pair that's on the drag strip right now, Langdon and Schumacher. Tony, we talked about, we thought Schumacher, or rather Langdon, may have had a stumbling block in Salinas in the first round with those more idealistic conditions. Racetrack temperature has come up about 15 degrees. It's 130 right now, and the DA has come up 600 feet. Does that favor Sean or Tony?
Well, it almost seems like it's going to favor Tony. I mean, the closer, the hotter it's going to get. I think the more that they have been able to operate in a certain range, in that mid-80 range, I'm pretty sure that both these teams are going to go back to what they did so well in qualifying.
Both cars now both teams making those final adjustments. Phil Schuler stepping to the rear of Tony Schumacher's car, standing in for Todd Okuhara. John Langdon's crew looks ahead. Round 2, Top Fuel. A monstrous starting line advantage for Tony Schumacher, and it is a whole shot win. What happened to Langdon up there? That is the question of the hour. 382.7 beats a 379. And this guy's feeling himself right now. The mojo's rising.
You can see the owner, Maynard, on the starting line, nodding his head. He knows that's what a 8-time champion will give you occasionally. Now, Sean Langdon was late, but extraordinary off of that starting line was Tony Schumacher. In 0.45, the good drivers, the champions, rise for the occasion, and that made the difference.
0.04 of a second separation at the finish line. Schumacher at 3:13. Joe Maynard, we heard from him earlier. Him, his son, his grandson, the entire family, his wife Kathy, he's nodding his head in approval, as you said, Tony, and that's the differential here at the finish line. And you can see what appears to be a cylinder out there for Schumacher's car. He had enough in the tank. We get a look at our Fatheads Eyewear drone shot here, looking back toward the starting line at Pacific Raceways. A heck of a view, heck of an environment at this drag strip, and frankly, a heck of a racing surface that's hanging in there under high conditions. We have the Flavor Pack top fueler of Brittany Force in this week's peak. Did you know the winning women of the NHRA, the women with 10-plus pro-class wins, Angel leading everybody, Erica making gains on that record of 46, Shirley Muldowney, Brittany Force, Courtney Forrest, Karen Stouffer, Leah Pruitt, and these are the racers with 10-plus. There are far more than that on the list. A motorsport unlike any other when it comes to diversity of all walks of life. Josh Hart and Brittany Force now. Josh Hart got a big jump on the starting line. The car hazes the tires, and at the finish line stripe, it is Brittany Force. Brittany was perhaps in a spot of trouble there, but she ran around him. 379 beats a 392.
Well, that's exactly the advantage that Josh Hart was looking for. He was able to execute and do his part as a driver. However, he didn't have the car. This car is going to go out about 300 to 400 feet, and you can see it start to slip the tire. And of course, Brittany Force, happy that happened. She had the performance, but with being a little bit late off the starting line, she was not penalized.
We see the early performance of this car. It is something that other Top Fuel teams have tried to match, and to this moment, nobody has been able to get their car moving as quickly as the Flavor Pack team.
For Tony Schumacher, advancing on now to the semifinals. It took a whole shot, though, Tony, but you say the lights seem to be longer and longer. How difficult is that as the driver?
Well, you know, it used to be 0.8 to 1.2 is what I recall those numbers being, and they just seem like they're forever now. I know it probably affected Langdon. He's one of the best levers out here, you know, so hey, for the Maynard family racing team, second round, this is truly unbelievable. I just feel blessed to be able to do it. Skag Power Equipment, you guys, we love you. We'll see you at the next race. You know, everyone at Okuma, fantastic, and God bless America. Man, this is a great place to do it. Man, I've had some great success here, and I'll continue to do that.
You can hear it in his voice. This is perhaps a rejuvenation for Tony Schumacher. It is now the sparkling ice caffeinated colors in that Dodge SRT top fueler of Leah Pruitt. The 2018 Seattle runner-up to Antron Brown. And Doug Coletta, who made the semifinals for the first time in over a year last week, is angling to do it again. And coming into this pairing, it is Leah Pruitt with the quicker automobile.
Well, by 0.05 of a second. That was in the first round. I did see Alan Johnson flipping that little panel open. That is the clutch management system. Don't know if he was trying to slow something down, or more than likely trying to make it a little more aggressive based on the performance of some of the cars that have already run.
Explodes off the starting line, 75. Leah's right there with him, and it's Leah Pruitt, 381.8. By 41 10,000ths of 1 second, she moves ahead. 382.7 at 316. That's a classic side-by-side fight there.
Well, this is quality driving, quality tuning, a good read on the track by both tuners, just not quite enough in the tank. It was Doug Coletta, the slightest advantage off the starting line. He, like a few other drivers in competition, are going to look back and say, if I could have just been a little bit quicker, the outcome would be different.
At the finish line stripe, we watch one more time here as Doug Coletta at full speed ahead. You saw that cylinder begin to misfire very, very late in the run. Could be argued that that might have been the end of it, but if he had just been a little quicker on the tree, as you mentioned, Tony, he would have gotten the win light. It will be Brittany and Leah next round. Let's hear from Brittany Force. She's with Jamie.
And I just told Brittany that with her 79, she will have lane choice in the semifinals over Leah here on this hot racetrack. How big of a deal does that make to you sitting in the seat?
We want that lane choice. You know, we want to be able to put that ET on the board. That gives us that, you know, opportunity to pick the lane that we want. It's hot and it's tricky out there. And David Grubnick, this entire Flavor Pack team, we've done a good job so far, but we have 2 more.
Continuing to hear that measured tone out of Brittany Force. Icy cool in the seat. She's driving the car very capably. The Fatheads eyewear drone camera looking down upon the Capco car on the left-hand side of Steve Torrence. The Phillips Connect top fueler of Justin Ashley on the right. Justin Ashley is undefeated against Steve Torrence this year, Tony.
Well, I'm sure Steve is looking for a different outcome. Based on his consistency during qualifying, he may have the slight edge.
Steve Torrence smokes the tires after an 0.37 light. Justin Ashley, it is almost incomprehensible after what we've seen this team do for 5 years, is now 5-0 against Steve Torrence in 2022.
Well, what's amazing is when it seems that they have such a good handle, the car is so predictable and doesn't lose traction in the second round. As we've seen the track temperature become more gooey, the grip goes away. It was almost unexpected, especially based on the runs we have seen from the top fuel cars directly in front of them. But the only thing that this could be is when a tuner is just pushing a little too hard. You can see those rear Goodyears start to wobble, and there's the white smoke. And at that point, there wasn't any mistake on the part of Justin Ashley to get to that finish line.
Nice tune-up by Mike Green, and credit to where it's due on Torrence with that brilliant reaction time, only to lose it in a loss of traction. Force and Pruitt on one side, Ashley Schumacher on the other. 3 of these drivers have won this year. Tony Schumacher has not, and he is seeking a final round. When we come back, it'll be time for Nitro Funny Car Round 2 action. Alexis DeJoria will be part of it, and the Rocket Phones machine, she is warming up her hot rod. We're warming up now, too. Stay with us. Welcome back to Pacific Raceways. Brian Lones, Tony Pedregon in the booth. Jamie Howe, roving reporter here this weekend. She's stationed at the top end. We take a look at our weather by round as we see John Force and Tim Wilkerson begin to approach the starting line. This is how things have begun to evolve today. Round 1, it was 79 degrees. Now it's 86. The track temperature up about 15 degrees, and the density altitude crept 400 feet higher. One thing we keep seeing, though, Tony, especially in top fuel, is the fact that they were able to run those 370s. We're moving further and further away from that 1,500-foot ideal density altitude.
Well, like we've said all weekend, the track for the temperature is still extremely good. It's all in the bell housing and the clutch management system.
PG veterans, Wilkerson, Force, they lead very closely, and this one's going to go to John Force. 3.965 miles an hour, 323.97 miles an hour. We had a chance to talk to John between rounds. He made an unscheduled visit to our broadcast booth. He's feeling the flow, too. He loves this place.
Well, John and his right foot is the reason that he is in this second round. His car in the first round lost traction. He was able to regain traction by a little bit of fancy driving, but here, this is good teamwork. This is a good rebound. You can see wide open throttle from the starting line to the finish line. That means his tuner was able to make the proper adjustments.
The Summit onboard camera for Tim Wilkerson showing what's happened when his car lost traction, and John Force power to the finish line. John Force will have an opponent next round, but the winner of this pair will not. Bob Taska III and J.R. Todd are angling for what is effectively a free trip to the final round. The car count this weekend means there is a bye next round, and one of these races will get it. Tony, I like to call it a WOGO. You win one, you get one.
Brian, you can keep that word, whatever that means. But Bob Taska was pretty conservative off the starting line. Don't look for him to be in that kind of race mode right now. He outperformed J.R. Todd by only 0.02 of a second. We saw a very quick run by this Motorcraft team, but the DHL team seems to be rebounding very well.
And J.R. Todd lives in the low 60s of reaction time. His average is 63. He was 60 in round 1. We'll find out how quickly Taska decides to step on the throttle. Taska roasts the tires, and J.R. Todd is going to the finals of the Northwest Nationals. 398.0, 323 miles an hour. John Oberhofer is fired up.
Well, Christmas came a little early for this DHL team. Off of the starting line, we haven't seen that from the Motorcraft team. They have been running so well, but there's the instant tire smoke, you can see that black track. The Motorcraft cars leaving, too much wheel speed early in the run. And a lot of the measures these teams have had to take because of the increase in the track temperature, they typically take what's called counterweight off of the clutch so that the clutch is not as aggressive. But for this DHL team, they've been pretty racy, even in qualifying in the first round. And now in the second round, that gives them a free pass to the final.
And J.R. Todd will take it. Now we go to the top and again to speak to John Force, who is with Jamie Howe.
John Force likes to say he's been racing up here for 100 years. John, you are going round, so you've got some consistency in this car in the heat of the day. What does this mean for this team?
Well, it's coming around Daniel Hood and Fabrizi. It's been fast, but it's dropping holes at the same spot, and I'm having to pedal to get it through there. But I want to say to Noah and Ashley at home, God bless you, and Courtney and Harlan and the new baby. I love you. I'm working my butt off, but I'm excited to be a part of this with Peak and everybody in Chevrolet and Auto Club. And at the end of the day, I forgot where I was going, so it don't make one around. And Wilkerson, he's the best. He's the best.
These trees were acorns when John Force started racing this track strip. As Robert Height makes his way back up the left-hand side of your screen in that Auto Club Chevrolet next to the Bandero Premium Tequila GR Supra of Alexis DeJoria. It's a fascinating matchup, Tony. Really, Robert Height has it on paper anyway by a significant margin with that 391, but I keep watching this car make full passes.
Well, Brian, it's not often that John Force is corrected, but, you know, Robert Height is the best right now. And in the other lane, it's Alexis that is the most consistent, and that'll come in handy, but she does have to consider and factor in the performance from Robert Height in the first round, but also lurking in the back of her mind has to be that Bob Tasca was just in that lane and blew the tires off right at the starting line.
Another very high-powered car, of course. Tasca's car has been the class of the field over the last several races. But Robert Height, Jimmy Prock, Chris Cunningham, and crew are aiming and angling for another trip to another semifinal round. It is Alexis smoking the tires. It is Robert cruising to a 396 at 320 miles per hour to move on to race the boss, John Force.
Drinking the same Kool-Aid as John Force. Both of these cars run identical times, both of them team cars advancing into the next round, and they both seem to have a pretty good setup for these hot weathers as the weather and the temperatures continue to increase.
So Robert Height takes the Auto Club Chevrolet to yet another late round finish here. We'll find out how late it goes as the ensuing rounds begin. Now we go down again to talk to Funny Car Racers with Jamie Howe.
And J.R. Todd just let out a little bit of a giggle when he realized that he's got a bye going into the final round of eliminations. You're going to face off against either John or Robert. Big, tough competition day for you. How is this team managing to continue through these motions?
It seems like it came together there. Q3 and definitely first round, you know, Todd and John, they just keep picking away at it and trying stuff, and it's working. I mean, I got to give a shout out to the track here, Pacific Raceways and NHRA. They're doing a hell of a job with the track temp, the track's hanging in there, and the fans sitting in those aluminum seats. They're the brave ones out here. Thanks for spending your hard-earned money to come out here and watch us try to put on a good show. Hopefully we can make a good test pass this bye run and see what we got for these JFR cars in the final.
It is a rare day when you know you're guaranteed a spot in the final round, Tony.
Well, everyone's earned it. You talk about J.R. Todd, and he's going to get a free pass, but they have earned their way into that final as well as one of these Chevy Camaros.
The Toyota Autograph Session was well attended this weekend, as all the specialty events have been at Pacific Raceways. The Toyota drivers signing autographs. We're talking the likes of Steve Torrance, Doug Coletta, Sean Langdon. There's JR right next to Ron Capps. He's still in. Antron Brown's been eliminated. We're going to eliminate more cars when we come back. Don't leave. Back here at Pacific Raceways, our Fatheads Eyewear drone camera following the team of J.R. Todd, making the tow back to the pit area to get the car serviced. And, you know, Tony, the attitudes of these rides must change wildly between we got to get back there and service it to I can't believe that just happened out there.
Yeah, unfortunately, they are pretty short for these drivers. I mean, the turnaround is about 60 minutes. They know these cars will be serviced, completely rebuilt with either new or recycled pistons, connecting rods, more than likely a different supercharger within 40 minutes.
This is the Pro Stock Ladder for round 2, presented by Lucas Oil. 4 great matchups, one of them forming up on the starting line right now. Is that between Kyle Koretsky and Aaron Stanfield? For Aaron Stanfield, an 0.60 reaction time is something that he cannot have again. For Kyle Koretsky, an 0.19 is something he would love to have again.
Yeah, and I think for Kyle Koretsky, I mean, he really stepped up to the plate in the first round. He needs to work on the consistency, and if he can get there, he has had the car all year that can run with Aaron Stanfield.
Performance-wise, Stanfield carrying a monstrous advantage in pro stock of 400s, coming in with a 6.605 from round one. Koretsky ran 6.64.1. A red light start for Koretsky. He pushed it too hard. 0.29 red. He fouls his way out of the drag race. And a 6.64.3, a 2.08 for Aaron Stanfield is what he will have next to his name for round number 3.
Well, you want to be quick, but not quite that quick. Kyle Koretsky really throws the race away on the starting line, but more than likely is still going to get outrun on the track. It was Aaron Stanfield that was still 0.02 of a second better than Kyle in the other lane.
So for Aaron Stanfield, maintaining pace here, trying to anyway with Erica. He's behind her, but he's not losing ground yet. We look back to the Bristol Thunder Valley Nationals, and it was this final round that will go down as one of the more iconic of Aaron Stanfield's life. It shook the tires and got sideways. Erica absolutely caved a motor into pieces. He jammed the car back into gear and managed to drive around her. The Elite Motorsports team said, well, that was weird, but we got the Wally. And Aaron Stanfield has had success on the Western Swing. He won Pomona and he won Sonoma last year. You can see the wins down there for 2 for him. Aaron Strong, the 2016 winner here at the Northwest Nationals, an incredible story. He actually won the race at the U.S. Nationals when the final round was washed out. But Greg Anderson still head and shoulders above the rest with those Western Swing wins. That is Greg Anderson, the HendrickCars.com Camaro. Rolling ahead, Anderson will be facing Fernando Quadra Jr. here. The Corral Boots Mustang for Junior ran a 663 018 light, which is the MO here of the Quadra family. We know they pushed the tree, and that is their want, and that is their need, and he's going to have to do it again.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly what Fernando Quadra is going to be looking for on the starting line. Now, when Greg Anderson is on his game, he's not going to give you too much. The problem is he hasn't been real consistent. His reflexes seem to be falling off, but you know, this is somewhat of a resurgent Greg Anderson's. You breathe a little bit of life back into this guy, and it could be a completely different story.
Anderson and crew took a red-eye home from Sonoma. They went straight to the engine shop. They worked 12 hours a day. The motor in this car is a hot rod piece they put together that was effectively lost in shipping on the way out to Seattle. They found it at the last second, and so far it has proven very, very good. A red light start for Fernando Quadra Jr. Greg Anderson goes 6:59.8 at 2:07. Quadra a 6:67.3. Once again, settled with a red light.
Well, when you talk about the Quadras, we really compliment them on how quick they are, and most of the time they're in a position where they need to make up some performance, so they're going to roll the dice a little bit. But we've seen a lot of foul starts from the Quadras lately, but you have to take a shot at Greg Anderson when his car is performing as well as it has been.
Anderson running within a thousandth of a second of what he ran in the first round. You saw that little move the car made early. Veteran driving there to prevent that car from getting outside the groove or doing anything untoward. And Greg Anderson. It's like the old guard's kind of woken up here. We look at Schumacher and Top Fuel, we look at Force and Funny Car, and we look at this guy here in Pro Stock. Troy Coughlin Jr. and Camry Caruso. Tequila Commissario for Caruso, Jegs.com for Troy Coughlin Jr. The Quadra family has had a bunch of red lights since Bristol. 10 of them, 4 for Fernando Jr., 4 for Christian, 2 for Fernando Sr. All the other competitors in the class combined have 4. We now go to the top end of the racetrack. Jamie Howe has caught up with Aaron Stanfield.
Stanfield advancing on to another semifinal. This makes 6 in a row for you, but you're running 64s. Other competitors are running 59s. What more does your team need to do today?
We just need to make a little bit better run this next run. You know, first pair out's always a little tough, and it's tricky out here today. It's hot, and but I've got total confidence in my guys, and we're going to go up here and try to get it done. Thank you.
And again, Tony, all these cars making that subtle move down low as the car is making wheel speed on a hot racetrack.
Well, unlike the nitro cars that are supercharged and that make more power than they need most of the time, these pro stock cars, if they get off the starting line, hit their shift points, and they're really out of gears by the 8th mile. So the Not a lot of downforce on these cars, but you can see how smooth and how streamlined they are, but they just don't make the horsepower that is going to get the car in trouble from the 8th mile to the finish line.
Camry Caruso has a 9th advantage over Troy Coughlin Jr. leaving the starting line. The horsepower advantage goes to Troy. 661.9 beats a 663.5. With her starting line advantage, the margin just 7 thousandths of a second at the stripe.
Yeah, I mean, if you really follow Troy Jr. these last few races, I mean, his performance is just about a step behind his teammate Erica, who's really been dominating this year.
We watched the cars leave again. So close. Such a precision class of drag racing. And on the finish line, the script was flipped. And there you see Troy Coughlin Jr. making his way out of the next round to face Greg Anderson. Out of the frying pan and straight into the fire there for Coughlin. So Troy Coughlin Jr. will meet up with Greg Anderson in the next round of Pro Stock Eliminator. He's going to climb out of his Jegs.com Camaro. The next stop in the NHRA Drag Racing Series Tour will be Topeka, Kansas. Qualifying coverage begins August 13th at 4:30 p.m. Eastern on FS1 and then continues on Sunday, August 14th at 1 p.m. Eastern on FS1. And you'll stay right there on FS1. Directly following that qualifying show will be final round eliminations from the NHRA National event in Topeka, Kansas. The crew communicating, that is Mark Ingersoll communicating with Eric Anders. Across the racetrack is Dallas Glenn. Now, last season, Dallas Glenn stemmed the bleeding for Greg Anderson. He beat Erica in Las Vegas, which ultimately set up a championship for Greg Anderson. I'm not saying Greg needs the help today, but I'm sure he wouldn't mind it.
No, Greg could use the help. You can always use the help. But Dallas Glenn is close enough in performance. If he could do his thing, work a little magic on the starting line, he's got just as good a chance of winning this round.
We watch the cars stage now. Right side of your screen, the Melling Performance car of Enders, the Rad Torque Systems car of Glenn on the left side. The next level of these two drivers, they are incredibly successful sportsman racers as well. They see this Christmas tree a lot in a multitude of different equipment. Dallas barely staging the car fully. Now they're up. A 30 light for Glenn, a 51 light for Erica Enders. This could be big trouble at the big end of the racetrack, and it is going to be Erica, 59.4. Low ET of the round. Glenn goes 663.3.
Well, Dallas Glenn needed a little bit more off of the starting line. A 30 is slightly better than the class average. I'm sure he's going to look back and say, I could have done a little better. You can clearly see that he gets the jump off the starting line, but just not enough punch, not enough in the tank, not enough horsepower is what it comes down to.
These are the moments with Erica Enders that people have failed to capitalize on. This is why she's in the position she is. When she's 51 on the tree, nobody's been able to take advantage of it. It's amazing this season, and it's not because of luck. It's because of her ability that she's able to win these rounds. But dang, that's what he's going to be thinking. Anderson will take on Coughlin. Enders will take on Stanfield again. These two continue to find each other like a pair of magnets over the course of the Pro Stock season, and it is going to be pretty wild stuff in the semifinals. The Nitro teams are thrashing. This is Brittany Force's team, the Flavor Pack Pit Cam in the Flavor Pack Top Fuel Pit area. She is mounting her parachutes up, and the team is doing the engine service. Leah Pruitt's team also getting the job done over in the Tony Stewart Racing Pit area. It will be Leah. It will be Brittany, and we will be back in a moment. Welcome back to the pit area here at Pacific Raceways. That is the Sponsor Fire Funny Car of J.R. Todd. It's been starring in an ad campaign. You can go to sponsorfire.com, submit your own design, and if you win, that design will appear at NHRA Camping World National events. You want to register for some prizes? You want to check out some of the street-going hot rods and performance cars and trucks Toyota is offering? You can do all of that, including spinning the Monster prize wheel as well. J.R. Todd's team is thrashing on his DHL Super right now, Tony. They're reassembling the engine, and all appears to be going to plan.
Looks like it's a very controlled pit service here. They've already cycled fresh or new pistons, connecting rods. They've already bolted on the cylinder heads as well as the rocker assembly.
Coming up at the U.S. Nationals, it will be the Pep Boys NHRA All-Star Funny Car Call-Out, and there is one very notable name currently not qualified. the way you make your way into this, you gain points where you qualify race to race. Tim Wilkerson is hanging on to a slim lead for that 8th spot over J.R. Todd. Todd will have 2 more opportunities to try to bust his way into this field. Otherwise, he'll be a spectator when all of his friends and some of his frenemies are racing for over $100,000. J.R. Todd needs performance. Humans have performance. And we took some of our drivers, some of our personalities, and went to the Olympic Training Center in Park City, Utah to see what human performance is like for drag racers.
Welcome to Park City, Utah, home of the U.S. Olympic ski and snowboard team, where I joined Team Toyota to get the full Olympic experience. While the Center for Excellence wasn't exactly my forte, what was the G-forces we felt in the Olympic bobsled experience.
If you listen close, you can almost hear the rumble as that sled is approaching the belly of the beast. The most technical of all turns here. Turn number 12. Listen up that as these guys go 73 miles an hour. And I can tell you something, it is truly awesome. You come around that curve and everything just kind of gets sucked over and the whole life sucked out of you. It is truly awesome.
Feel the rhythm, feel the ride. Get on up, it's bobsled time.
It was fast. It was intense. It's like a lot of G-force, but different G's than what we experienced.
Feels a lot faster than 70 miles an hour when you're in it.
You're kind of getting beat around a little bit, but at the same time, it's cool, the G-force that you experience going through the big sweeping corners.
I tried it once in Lake Placid, and I wrecked, and then I realized that I'm not a bobsledder.
Gives you a whole new respect for the Olympians.
But I like riding them. They're fun.
A fun experience for Bruno and the fellas out there in Park City, Utah. This week's Suzuki Science of Speed. We look back 1 week ago. Tony Joey Gladstone's victory. This will stand as a moment in this man's life he'll never forget.
Yeah, and while he had come close, there's nothing like actually getting to the finish line. It happened in a great place at sea level, but Joey Gladstone has been working his way towards his first win. Winning that final round on a hole shot, it was a momentous moment, and he is hanging in there in the points as well. He is in second right now and is threatening to take that points lead away from Angel. It is a very interesting situation he is in, and the reason he's there is because the last 3 events, he made 3 straight final rounds in his Pro Stock motorcycle. We take a look now at these motorcycle points. He is 2 points behind Angel. A good qualifying session. The guy could assume the points lead for the first time in his life. Steve Johnson's in 3rd, Matt Smith 4th. Eddie Krawick, who is the runner-up in Sonoma, finished, right now sits in the 5th position. The Pro Stock motorcycles may not be here in Seattle, but they will rejoin our program in Topeka, which is the next stop in the NHRA Camping World Drag Racing Series Tour. Remember, qualifying coverage begins Saturday on FS1, continues 1 p.m. Sunday on FS1, and then at August 14th, 2 p.m., following that FS1 qualifying show, the final round eliminations will be shown on FS1. We didn't just go to the Olympic Center. We went to the Seahawks training camp, and we sent Ron Capps and Alexis DeJoria there to hang out.
So y'all driving the ones that, like the long, skinny ones?
No, the funny cars with the bodies on them.
Why they call them funny?
Good question.
They're not funny.
They're not funny.
Funny about them.
11,000 horsepower.
So you guys go up 300 miles per hour?
Yeah.
What do you think?
330 now.
How did you get all the way to the crazy stuff? I mean, were you guys racing other stuff first?
I worked my way up, yeah.
You don't start just, I'm going to be a crazy ass driver, right?
Well, what's a common injury in
Mine was I went in the sand trap at the end, no parachutes, and it flipped and spun and trapped me inside. I couldn't, because we could only get out the roof hatch.
One of my last bad ones was the whole car just burned to the ground.
Yeah. The nitromethane is rocket fuel, so I mean it's gnarly. I mean it's a bomb, if you don't do it right. So if you just start it and something happened to shut it off, they got to rebuild it.
Next time I see Caps, I'm going to ask if he was standing up when he spoke to those guys. That's a couple of mountains of humanity there. What a neat experience as we look now to Brittany Force's pit area. The Flavor Pack Top Fuel Dragster warming up their engine, getting ready to contest the semifinal round of Top Fuel Eliminator, where she will face Leah Pruitt. The autograph session happening in the pit area, bringing out those Flavor Pack drivers and John Force Racing personalities who are signing autographs all weekend long. It really is such an interactive experience when you come to an NHRA national event. It goes so far beyond just seeing the machines run down the racetrack. Young fans, junior dragster racers and all, hanging out at the pits. When we come back, it'll be time for Top Fuel round number 3. After one of the greatest games in recent memory, the MLB returns to the place where dreams come true. Relive the magic when the Reds take on the Cubs for one game in heaven. One game at the Field of Dreams, August 11th on Fox. Now it is time to go Top Fuel Drag Racing semifinal round action here. Leah Pruitt will take on Brittany Force. Tony, we look at the track that both of these cars have taken, and really we look at the drivers. Both drivers were a little on the tardy side round one, but they both snug reaction times up in round number two as our Fatheads eyewear drone cam shows them backing to the starting line. The number 1 and 12 qualifiers on one side, the 7 and 3 qualifiers on the other. Brittany Force, of course, Flavor Pack colors, the Flavor Pack Northwest Nationals, the number 1 qualifier. Leah wearing the Sparkling Ice caffeinated colors on the side of her Dodge SRT Top Fueler this weekend. Brittany obviously comes in with a performance advantage.
Well, only a slight performance advantage. Leah has a car that can run with Brittany. Now, if the conditions are cooler, this would be a different story. If David Grebnick, the tuner for Brittany Force, can tap into that private reserve, it's a different story. But the hottest point of the day, that 90-degree temperature has surfaced. The track temperature close to 140 degrees.
Both drivers have been in finals on the Western Swing. Will they make another one? Which will make another one? Brittany Force out first. Leah smokes the tires, and Brittany Force at 382.3. A speed of 325.61 miles per hour places her in the final round with authority.
Well, the strain was much more than Leah could bear on the starting line. A very late 141. But that wasn't the only problem that she had. It was tire smoke about 300 feet off the starting line. You could see the clear advantage for Brittany Force. Sharp off the starting line, good driving, car in the center of the lane, good and smart tuning. This car was well in the 70s earlier. They're slowing it down and compensating for the hotter conditions.
Brittany, of course, winning last week in Sonoma. It is her 33rd career final round, and she will face either Justin Ashley or Tony Schumacher. We talk about the final rounds that our semifinalists have made. We had Sonoma, of course. We had Brittany in that final round. Denver was where Leah won the race just a couple of weeks back. Bristol this year was when Justin Ashley was in the final round last. And for Tony Schumacher, Houston 2020.
Well, hey, Tony Schumacher, I mean, he's really earned his spot here. He is the reason this car is in the semifinals. However, they did have the performance. I mean, he had an exceptionally good starting line advantage. He won the race on a hole shot, but his tuner gave him a car that went down the track. It was pretty close to the competition.
He is a guy who has thrived in these moments over the course of his career. Tony Schumacher has found himself in places like this more times than any other human being on the planet, and he has succeeded at many of them. For Justin Ashley, the Phillips Connect Vita C Shot Toyota Top Fuel Dragster is very good. Comes in with a 378.5, having run 378.2 previous to that. It is a vehicle that has been printing tickets, as we like to say in this sport. Tony Schumacher comes in about a half a tenth behind at a 382.
Well, Brian, these conditions, even though it has reached 90, these teams are running in 95-degree weather a day or two ago, so they're very acclimated to these conditions, and they're still manageable regardless of the racetrack temperature. And normal conditions, we'd see this track temperature and we'd say, well, a lot of these cars are going to lose traction, they're going to run really slow. That hasn't been the case. This is a very well-prepared and smooth racetrack.
A piece of career perspective. You saw that Tony Schumacher is trying to reach his 8th final round in Seattle. Justin Ashley has reached 8 final rounds, period. Ashley smokes the tires. Schumacher's going to pedal. Ashley pedals. It's completely sideways. A wild contest puts Tony Schumacher in his first final round since Texas of 2020.
Look, I think the world of Justin Ashley, but we witnessed experience versus lack of experience. Now, most drivers can maneuver these cars down the racetrack when everything works right, when the clutch timers go off, but both these cars are losing traction. You can see one driver on the right side of the screen, very cool, very calm, very composed, good throttle maintenance, and the other driver just getting a little too excited, getting back on the throttle when the car isn't positioned straight. You can see those rear tires on the Justin Ashley machine start to chatter. The car is losing traction. You could see it in trouble early. Here's Tony Schumacher, the launch.
Surgical.
Look at the throttle blades open and close, not once, not twice, but a couple of times. Take a look. These are the throttle blades. Right now, wide open throttle. There is smoke coming off the rear tires. They're going to close. You can see the raw fuel coming out of the pipe. Closes the throttle blades. Take another look. He's going to ease back into them, but that's not going to do the trick. These rear tires are still going to spin. He's going to ease off that throttle one more time, give it another go, but he's going to make sure that the car is positioned properly. And Tony Schumacher, once again, like he did in the second round, is the reason that this car will see its first final round of the year.
Now let's listen to this. Just unbelievable. And these engines do not like that, Tony. These engines do not like to be turned on and off like a light switch, but neither supercharger fell off the top.
Brian, to your point, they don't like the high RPM. Now, these are a very stable car when they are locked down to the racetrack. There it is, Joe Maynard. He is taking a look at the handiwork from his driver.
Cool as a cucumber. Nods his head in silent approval and heads back to the top end. Brittany Force is with Jamie Howe. She is in the final.
Brittany Force is going to take her strong flavor pack dragster to the final round against against Tony Schumacher. You think about the times that he hasn't been to the finals lately. You have that experience on him this season. What are you going to have for him?
You know, we don't look at that. We look at our car, our team, and what we could do, how we could handle that track and get down there first. You know, we've had a great weekend. We struggled in qualifying, but we seemed to figure it out today on race day. And I'll have to say, when I was sitting in that car, getting ready to come out here for that last run, there was a junior dragster driver. Over the loudspeaker, she said, make sure you're having fun. So you got to always have your heart in it. And this flavor pack team, we're going for another win.
Young Abigail Cole this weekend was announcing at the racetrack, and that is the voice that Brittany heard. Applying that advice, J.R. Todd, the GR Supra, sitting next to John Force. J.R. Todd has a bye to the final, and you'll watch it when we come back.
The Flavor Pack, NHRA Northwest Nationals on Fox, is sponsored by Flavor Pack, premium frozen vegetables and fruits, farmer owned, nature grown.
Welcome back to Pacific Raceways. We have just completed the semifinals of Top Fuel Eliminator. Justin Ashley was eliminated, which means Tony Schumacher is advancing on to the final. But Justin, that was a wild ride. What happened?
Just went up in smoke, right? That's what happens when you're racing, and just tried to give it a ride. I saw Tony have some trouble in the other lane, so I wanted to give our Phillips Connect team a shot, so we brought out all that Vita C energy for us this weekend, and real proud of the guys. I mean, we didn't accomplish what we wanted to this weekend, but I thought we ran really well, and, you know, the real number for us is 47. These guys turned this car around in this weather in 47 minutes, and really proud of this team, so we'll regroup and move on to the next one.
And here is J.R. Todd. For the 5th time in his career, Todd will have a bye run in the DHL GR Supra. Now, Tony, this is, in all respects, a test run, and this car has not had the elapsed times that we've seen out of the two Force cars, one of which he'll be racing next round.
No, they're going to attempt a full run. There's no question about it. You talk about a shortage of inventory. This Coletta team has it all. Not only the talent surrounding this car, but they have plenty of inventory, so they're going to shoot for lane choice. I don't think it's going to matter. I still hear drivers talk about they want this lane or that lane. I think both of them are equal, but it is nice to have.
And J.R. Todd on a nice run, 398.4 and 323.5 miles an hour. This car has lived in that 95 to 98 range today, which is quicker than they qualified, but it's nice and clean.
You know, we've seen this movie so many times that you let this car hang around too long just when we thought they were down and out. We've been talking about Capps and Hagan and Robert Height, and of course now Tasca. And Enter the Dragon. Now it's this yellow DHL car that is coming on strong like it has done so many times. And we look at this car's performance and we listen to the different stages of clutch that are applied throughout the racetrack. And that 398, regardless of what Force and Robert Height do, that is going to put them in the game.
And JR will climb over Cruz Pedregon in the point standings today. He'll move from 7th to 6th at worst.
over the course of this race day. And now it is John Brute Force versus Robert Hight. And perhaps a stunning statistic, when I was doing my setup here between rounds, Tony, it is astonishing to me that Robert Hight has a 32-29 all-time record against his boss, a record you'd likely be envious of.
It looks like they left the tire cover on the Force car. That's what I'm thinking about. It just goes to show you the strength of Robert Hight, and I mean, you need not look farther than his tuner and the combination of two, because you can have a good car and a not so good driver. We see it every weekend, week in and week out. Some good cars don't have the driver, and they're way down in the points. And if you had a good driver in that good car, well, you're talking top three, and that's where Robert Hight lands. He's consistent. He's pretty reliable. But you are racing John Force. Now, John Force is based out of Southern California, but, you know, if he had a second home, if you knew the history of John Force, it could potentially be up here in Seattle with one of the all-time greatest promoters, a guy named Bill Donor, that used to have 32, advertised 64 funny car meets, and that is where John Force cut his teeth.
He absolutely cut his teeth. So many fans up here love this guy, as they do around the nation, the Pete antifreeze and coolant car. It should be noted, Daniel Hood runs his car one way. Jimmy Brock runs his car a completely different way, and they come in within 5 thou of each other to beat in this semifinal round. Force stuffed that car way in there. As they go to the finish line, Robert Hight drives away. It will be Robert Hight, 397.6, 319.45 miles an hour. And we have two funny cars going to a final round within 1/100th of a second of each other.
Yeah, Robert Hight is looking as strong as he did before Bob Tasca entered the picture. But we saw Tasca go out in the second round. Not the case for Robert Hight. And Robert Hight really responded to what Tasca was doing in that performance in the first round by having the quickest run, that 391. That stands as the quickest run of the weekend. Of course, we had much better conditions earlier. The density altitude was good. The track surface was a little bit cooler. But Robert Hight was and is still the guy to beat.
Veterans of Bayard is Todd's 41st career final round, and it is Hight's 92nd career final round. And they will take both of those accolades as the cars now being pushed by the NHRA Safety Safari off the end of the racetrack. The parachutes doing their jobs to get those cars slowed down. And again, the matchup here, and to me, the big wild card in this final round matchup, Robert Hight is a take it to the bank 70 lever. He stages the car identically the same way. He's a 70 guy. J.R. Todd also consistent in the staging manner, but he tends to be a 60 guy. We're talking about two cars matched up within a hun. This could be almost a pro stock style funny car race if one of them gets out on the other.
Well, I think it's going to live up to the expectations. I mean, there's no question that J.R. Todd is pretty solid on the starting line, but you can't forget that Robert Hight, when you back him into a corner, he can bring the heat. He has done that in a couple of these recent wins.
He absolutely has. So it has been spectacular on all fronts here, and there is opportunity for another John Force double up. Robert Hight and Brittany have doubled up together previously. They'd love to do it again here today to close out the Western Swing. A reminder, Topeka, Kansas is one of the first places that we ever saw Brittany Force and John Force double up. Qualifying Saturday, August 13th at 4:30 p.m. Eastern on FS1. And then qualifying coverage concludes August 14th, 1 p.m. on FS1. Same day, directly following the qualifying show at 2 p.m. Eastern on FS1. August 14th, elimination rounds from Topeka, Kansas. Now let's talk the funny car finalist, Robert Hight. He's with Jamie Howe.
And Robert Hight will have lane choice in the final round against J.R. Todd, but there is a chance for a John Force Racing double up here at Pacific Raceways. How important are these big moments to the team?
Oh, we love it. Brittany and I, we've doubled up a lot. It's a lot of fun. You know, the way our cars are running, we have a good shot, but J.R. Todd, he stepped up big. You know, that's a great run that team made in the heat. So I tell you, we got a lot of Cornwell folks. If we could put both these cars in the winner's circle, this would be a fun night. We could party.
We look down at the Flavor Pack Top Fuel team, the Flavor Pack Pit Cam, getting the job done, inspecting the pistons and rods that are being inserted into the block. And Greg Anderson, he also is flirting with a final round berth. We'll find out if he can punch his ticket when we return.
The Flavor Pack NHRA Northwest Nationals on Fox is sponsored by Camping World, making RVing fun and easy since 1966.
If you've ever wondered where the term logjam came from, That's it. A literal logjam up here in the greater Seattle, Washington area. It is time for Pro Stock. The ladder presented to us by Lucas Oil. It is Greg Anderson taking on Troy Coughlin Jr., Erica Enders, and Aaron Stanfield. The last time these two raced each other, Tony, it was a moment of grand controversy that followed that run. It was in Vegas last year, the second Vegas race. Troy Coughlin Jr. beat Greg Anderson and then lost the next round to Erica.
And then I got a phone call.
And then
I remember that.
And then our phone lines lit up.
It's too early in the year.
Operators are standing by.
Right now, I'm sure that Troy Coughlin would love to dispatch Greg Anderson. It seems like Greg has been on a collision course with Erica. He has to maintain the level of performance. He's been one of the quickest cars in the first round, in the second round. But here again, this is the test. If you want to prepare yourself for Erica in the final, sharpen your skills on the starting line. Well, Troy Jr. is as good as they get.
Yeah, Greg is going to have to stand up here. Troy needs to continue his torrid pace on the starting line. The Jakes.com Camaro and the HendricksCars.com machine inch in. And Anderson's car absolutely blows the tires off when he let the clutch out. It was bouncing itself through the first 60 feet. And that is going to be Troy Coughlin Jr. running 6:65.9 at 2:08. 6:65 puts away Anderson and a brutally rough launch.
Yeah, we're going to get into a look at that. You can see the chatter marks right off of the starting line for Greg Anderson, but this might have saved him a little embarrassment. He was off the starting line about 0.03 of a second.
Yeah.
And Troy Coughlin, as the temperature on the racetrack has increased, Greg Anderson would have had to have been pretty impressive to outrun, to catch Jake Coughlin and that starting line advantage.
Let's listen to this, and it is, well, this is not pretty. We talk about the control it takes, and obviously Anderson is disappointed and frankly probably furious inside the race car, but the self-control it takes to actually get your foot off the gas pedal and admit defeat is what separates the good from the great in this sport, as weird as it sounds to say.
Well, Brian, he gave it a go. He was actually able to get the car back in gear, get it back under power, but he did make the decision as he saw Troy just pull away to shut the car down.
For Troy Coughlin Jr., it will be his fourth career final round, the last one coming in Gainesville 2021. It's been a hot second. And once again, it's the Aaron and Erica show. We've seen it in finals, we have seen it in semifinals, and there was a lane swap made here. Erica was slated to be in the lane that Greg Anderson just left and smoked the tires in. She has placed Aaron Stanfield in that lane and taken the right-hand side of the drag strip. Melling Performance, Janik Brothers Racing, and JC3 Energy. As both cars now begin their burnout process. Tony, one of the things that is fairly fascinating regarding the staging process in a Pro Stock car on a racetrack this hot is where they place the machines. And we're going to see maybe two different strategies here. People assume you do the burnout, you back up at the burnout tracks. That isn't always the case. Sometimes these teams will look for a cooler spot to place the race car.
Well, they typically pick their spot where they want the launch, and they're going to position the driver to do the burnout, whether it's a few inches or maybe a foot towards the inside or the outside. You can see in Erica's case, she is lined up towards the outside of the lane, so they pre-selected exactly where they want this car to launch.
And interestingly, Stanfield's car is sitting directly in the track, so they have offset Erica's car a little, and they have set Stanfield in. And now, if you pay attention to Stanfield's lane on the right side, you can see the marks, those check marks on the racetrack that look like dashes. That's where Greg Anderson's car was shaking and rattling the tires so bad. Very interesting. They burned out just to the kind of inside of that area.
Now, the width of each lane, 30 feet wide, and they want to be centered up, regardless of where they're positioned. They want to be centered up once they get the launch off the starting line.
It will be an all-elite motorsports final, no matter who wins. Now, let's watch these cars stage.
This is the pre-stage procedure right here. See, Erica is now in. They'll roll the car in towards the stage area.
Erica's much more shallow. She's 0.28. Stanfield's 0.38. 8th mile. Aaron Stanfield leading. Finish line stripe, and is Erica Enders driving around it by 13,000. 664.9 beats a 665.2. And Erica Enders is going to try to win for the first time in Seattle since 2012.
Well, the performance for Aaron Stanfield, he had about 4 or 5 hundredths of a second to make up, and he was within 100th of a second. But here's another driver, young legs, giving up 100th of a second. Well, only to the driver that's been wearing everyone out on the starting line, and she can add another one to the list.
It is career final number 69 for Erica Enders, and she did it by the nose of her Melling Performance red Chevrolet Camaro. The final round in Pro Stock, Troy Coughlin Jr. and Erica Enders. Let's talk to one half of that final, Troy Coughlin Jr.
And when Troy Coughlin Jr. took his helmet off up here at the top end, the first thing he said was he's got a good race car. You said you're just one with it. As you go to your second final of the season, to somebody that's never driven before, what does that mean?
Yeah, it means you really get to enjoy the way the car feels, and just being one with one of these cars is just being able to listen to the motor and feel the car pick the fronts up, and if it quivers a little bit and the shift light comes on, you pull the gear. So there's definitely an intense amount of cognitive skill and driving ability that go in these cars, and it's a lot of fun.
And so it will be Tony Schumacher in that Top Fuel final. And yes, that is the second final of Coughlin's season, as he was in the Phoenix final earlier this year. When we come back, the Nitro service continues. We are back to Seattle, and this is a repair for Pep Boys belongs to Joe Meloff, a Vortex Superchargers top sportsman racer, and a very fine one at that, the 2019 Division 6 champion. He got loose at the top end, got the parachutes out, and still nerfed very lightly the retaining wall. Now, this didn't end Joe's day. Amazingly, Tony, he came back to take a bye run into the finals of the category here.
And as you can see, the racer's favorite tool, that is the 200-mile-an-hour patch job, but he was able to stage a car and advance himself into the final round.
Unfortunately for Joe, he did red light in the final, but it was a day full of heart, grit, and determination for Meloff. You can follow all of our Lucas Oil Drag Racing Series coverage coming up August 11th on FS2. You'll see Top Alcohol Funny Car, Top Alcohol Dragster, and all the Sportsman Finals. It has been a wild barn burner of an event here in every single category, and we are down now to the final rounds in our 3 Camping World professional categories. Welcome back at the booth, everybody. Brian Lones and Tony Pedregon here, and we're going to take you through these final rounds and kind of set up the scene of what we're about to watch, and we need to start talking about Top Fuel.
Well, we could see Tony Schumacher reinventing himself before our eyes. Unlike 2020, since his last win, we know that Tony Schumacher is going to be in the seat long term versus when he won his last race in 2020. We knew it was just a few races.
He took out Scott Palmer in the first round, made his way to this round number 2, kind of yeoman's work there. Then when he got to the second round, he faced off against Sean Langdon. Langdon, an uncharacteristic 121 reaction time, but more importantly, Schumacher was there to capitalize on it as champions do, and he won on a hole shot. Then the semifinal round came up, and he was against Justin Ashley, and once again experience reigned supreme.
Brian, it's not always the heavy right foot that'll win you races. It's smoothness. It's the ability to control the throttle. You can see Justin Ashley in the other lane, not just a walk in the park, all over the racetrack, but smooth, cool, calm, and collected was Tony Schumacher.
Remember, Tony's Western swing began with a wheel stand he had to pedal out of, and it brought him to a final round here. Brittany Force and Tony Schumacher. We can see the success rate that they have both had. Can anybody bet against Tony Schumacher? I think I might know somebody.
Top Fuel today has been an intense mix of both performance and experience, and that's really what we have in the final round with Brittany Force and Tony Schumacher. Now, if we hadn't seen Brittany run that 375 with a 3 to steal the #1 qualifying position, I might pick Tony Schumacher to win this final round. However, we did, and that was in the heat of the day also. This is Brittany Force's 5th final round of the 2022 season. She won the previous 4, including just last weekend in Sonoma, so my pick today is Brittany Force to go home with the Wally.
So Jamie has thrown her cards on the table behind Brittany Force. We now talk about the Nitro Funny Car category and J.R. Todd.
Yeah, J.R. Todd has really come to life, not necessarily in qualifying. We did see a small sign of consistency, but once again, it is impressive on race day when it matters the most.
John Oberhofer, the crew chief, along with Todd Smith in this car, normally not a very animated guy, has been very animated with each of these round wins.
Yeah, and this is the big win, the second round, taking on the #1 qualifier, the winner from 1 week ago, taking advantage of Tasca losing traction right early in the run.
8 clean cylinders as we look at J.R. Todd and Robert Height. And Tony, this one falls on your shoulders. Which one are you going with?
Well, like Jamie Howe, I am going with the low-hanging fruit. I'm going to go with Robert Height. This could potentially be his 6th win of the season, but it's going to be hard to beat the performance that Robert Height went. If it does cool off, he still has that #1 run, the quickest run of eliminations at 391 that they can call on.
All right, now we need to talk about Pro Stock Eliminator, and we talk about Troy Coughlin Jr. Jr. driving the Jegs.com Camaro is having the best race that we have seen him drive in some time, really since Phoenix to start the season.
Yeah, and this is no big surprise. This is the elite team that has been attempting to get Bo Butner and Troy Coughlin Jr. a better race car, better consistency, better performance, and it does seem like Troy Jr. is the first one to get that power.
And Troy has been not only leading consistently, he's been hitting his marks as far as the ship points and performance go. He comes in really not at much of a deficit to Eric Anders in terms of the raw ET the car has been turning.
No, and I think if Troy Jr. can compete on the starting line, as long as you can stay close. But one thing, you cannot make the mistake like every other driver in the Pro Stock category has done over the last 5 or 6 races. Don't give her much off the starting line.
You absolutely cannot, and Troy defeated Greg Anderson in that semifinal round to make it this far. We can see Troy Coughlin Jr. and Erica Enders. I'm going back in the history books on this one. Between March and April of 1882, Wyatt Earp went on what was known as the Vengeance Ride. He was trying to avenge the Cowboys that had attacked his brothers, Virgil and Morgan. Erica is on a vengeance ride that started in February and is not going to stop until November. Erica Enders is winning Pro Stock again this year, and she's going to do it here in Seattle. The NHRA Summit Racing Equipment Junior Dragster League is an incredible program that brings kids as young as 5 into the world of drag racing, piloting their own race cars. Those are junior dragsters. They use single-cylinder engines. They can run anywhere between 11.9 seconds and slower, all the way down to 7.9 seconds in the 8th mile. These cars allow these young kids to get the skills and hone the skills they need, not only driving drag racing cars, Tony, but really in life.
Hey, Brian, call me a dreamer, but what would it be like to park a junior funny car in between each of those dragsters?
It would be awesome. This is the final round of our shootout here. This is Dan O'Connor and Cole DeKoff. Cole DeKoff, unfortunately, red-lit on the starting line, and Dan O'Connor wins the Summit Racing Equipment Junior Dragster League shootout here at the national event in front of a big crowd of his hometown fans, parents, and friends. When we come back, it's the finals of the Camping World Drag Racing Series at the Northwest Nationals.
The Flavor Pack NHRA Northwest Nationals on Fox is sponsored by Toyota. Let's go places.
And we are back in for the final rounds here at these Flavor Pack NHRA Northwest Nationals, and we begin things with Pro Stock after what a weekend we have experienced from Friday qualifying through a hot Saturday that started to establish the favorites to a Sunday that has proven to be anything but predictable. There has been brilliance, there have been mistakes made, there has been great driving, and there have been some great tuning decisions made as well. The burnouts being completed by our 2 Pro Stock finalists, Troy Coughlin Jr., trying to become the 3rd member of his family to win in the Pro Stock category. His dad has 2 victories. His uncle Jag, more than 5 dozen victories. And Erica Enders is trying to get her first Wally since last week.
Yeah, that's a long time for her.
For Erica Enders, this is final round number 69. She's been a runner-up here in 2017. She won this race back in 2012, 10 years ago. And coming into this Western Swing, the story was the fact she had not won on the Western Swing since this race in 2012. Troy Coughlin Jr. made that final in Phoenix, and there's been some heartbreak in between a DNQ actually during this part of the season as well. So he is reinvigorated himself here. We look at the progression of the weather over the course of the day, Tony, and that density altitude did what we thought it did, or would do, about 800 feet of increase.
Yeah, and of course the temperature's a little more. The track temperature has actually come down. How can that happen when the temperature's actually warmer? Well, the sun has moved off the racetrack. I don't think that's going to have any bearing on the end result for either of these cars.
Both drivers get ready to take the tree and close out a grueling Western Swing of Pro Stock action. Erica is better by 6 1/1000ths of a second. At the 8th mile, Coughlin still leading at 1,000 feet. It's a draw. It's Coughlin by 1/10,000
amazing race. 663, 8 at 208 miles an hour. Enders goes 664, 4 at 209. He becomes the 71st person to ever win in Pro Stock since the class was brought into NHRA in 1970.
Brian, this falls within that same team. However, for Troy Coughlin and for the crew of that car, this is a big win. This is the beauty of not allowing Erica to get too much off of the starting line. Troy Coughlin could have given it away, but he hung close enough with her and surprisingly was able to outperform her on the racetrack.
3 zeros and a 1 to the right side of the decimal point to separate these cars at speeds nearing 210 miles an hour. An astonishing final round. That is as good as it gets in Pro Stock drag racing. And for Troy Coughlin Jr., an amazing moment in this young man's life. He has won in a multitude of sportsman categories. He has raced Top Fuel. He's raced injected fuel dragsters. He has won in almost everything he ever sat in, but this had eluded him. No longer. Troy Coughlin Jr. is officially a Pro Stock winner. He continues the Coughlin family legacy in a category that they have helped define for decades. Amazing, Tony.
Brian, and for this win, if any of the other Pro Stock competition wanted to know how to beat Erica, we'll go talk to Troy Jr.
So congratulations to Troy Coughlin Jr. Jamie Howe is catching up with him at the top end of the drag strip. And we now go to Jamie Howe and Troy Coughlin Jr., your Northwest Nationals Pro Stock victor.
Troy Coughlin Jr. took a couple of moments in the car to reflect on this moment. Your very first Pro Stock victory. You've thought about it. You've watched others get theirs. How does this moment compare to your expectation?
Oh, geez. I mean, it's really hard to describe. You know, since I was 5, 6 years old, I've been watching my uncle, my father, Jeg, John, Mike, all of them do this at this level. So to get this is extremely humbling, and so thankful to have such a wonderful group behind me, and can't wait to keep going.
Congratulations, Troy.
And now let's take a look at our Pro Stock Eliminator standings as they are at the close of this Flavor Pack Northwest Nationals. Eric Enders now a 103-point lead over Eric Stanfield. Kyle Koretsky and Greg Anderson doing their best to try to keep pace, but falling farther back, as is at basically everybody else but Troy Coughlin Jr., who's 507 out of the lead. J.R. Todd and Robert Height will round us out in Nitro Funny Car. Height, as we look down from the Fatheads eyewear drone camera, that is the Auto Club Chevrolet Camaro. Left side of your screen is the DHL GR Supra on the right side. Tony, we made our predictions. I muffed up the Pro Stock one pretty badly. We'll find out if you can come through here, but as we look at the racetrack and the conditions, you still sticking with your guns?
Yeah, I think I'm going to. Robert is in the lane that they opted for, but they're coming into this race 100th of a second quicker than J.R. Todd. Now that's not a very good cushion for Robert Height. I mean, J.R. Todd, they seem to have gotten stronger and stronger, but it is warm. It's pretty hot. And I mean, I think overall that, you know, Robert Height is going to have to leave with J.R. Todd. I know that he seems to come up to show up for the big races, for the big rounds, but I think unless something happens to Robert, I think it's their race to lose.
Todd has been a winner here, but it was back in his Top Fuel driving days. We'll find out what he can do here against Robert Height as both cars sit in pre-stage. Height is out first with a crushing 50 reaction time, and Height takes it to the house. 397.5 beats a 397.8. The margin of 200ths of a second coming off of his quick right foot.
Well, Brian, next week I want you to call me and address me as Nostradamus, and you can see the starting line advantage. I mean, Robert Height outperformed J.R. Todd on the track, but only by 0.003 of a second. So you can argue that this race was won on the starting line. You can see the slightest jump for Robert Height. But you talk about the big moments, the big races, and this is what determines this race. I mean, they were locked together. You could have thrown a blanket over them at 300 feet. Both of them were accelerating to 276 miles an hour at the 1/8 of a mile. But J.R. Todd has had the faster car all day, 324 miles an hour, but could not track down Robert Height.
It is race win number 6 on the season for Height. And J.R. Todd, as one would expect, disappointed, crushingly so, at that result. They've worked very hard to get to this point. He wanted to close the deal. Performance-wise, both cars were near a dead heat at 397.8 and 397.5, but Height skedaddled first with that 050 reaction time. And that leaves us the Top Fuel final. the Flavor Pack car at the Flavor Pack race. We just saw Leah do it. We saw the Dodge Power Brokers car at the Dodge Power Brokers race win. And then there is Tony Schumacher, the announcement of the Maynard family assuming the majority control of this drag racing team. Okuma, Skag Power Equipment, and the Maynard Family Foundation on the side of that car. Shades of the last race he won. When we go back to that 2020 race in Houston, late in the season, when Tony Schumacher beat Steve Torrence, he came in at about the same situation he's in here. His car hadn't performed as fast as Torrance's did up until the final round. He got himself a little on the starting line, and the crew stepped up and delivered him a good tune-up.
Look, it's doable. I mean, they just have to dial it up a little bit more than they did in the semifinals. This is the race that you're talking about. This is a classic Tony Schumacher, Steve Torrence, and where they found that performance, it's pretty inspiring that they were able to take down Steve Torrence when he was then and is kind of still in his prime.
We see Phil Schuler standing there. Todd Okahara is on the property today. He got here late last night or early this morning, and we know who is tuning this race car. Max Savage and David Grubnick. Incidentally, the first two times Tony Schumacher won this race, he beat another and the same top fuel driver. That driver's name, David Grubnick. Brittany smokes the tires! Tony Schumacher's going to win 397.7, 251 miles an hour. Are you kidding me?
I believe in magic. I didn't think they had much of a chance, but this goes to show you, and these cars are far from predictable. They have to rev up a certain amount. They have to have 8 cylinders, and the temperature and the climate and all the conditions play into how the engine is tuned. The clutch has to wear a very specific amount for these cars to have a successful run. But you can see early in the run that Brittany Force starts to wobble and chatter those rear tires. Look at the tire pattern. The car is in trouble earlier in the run than Tony Schumacher, and you can shortly after that you can see his car start to track, but at that point Brittany Force had pretty much given up the ghost.
In the top fuel category, this Western Swing has delivered us 2 very important things. We have seen 2 teams who had very troubling, frustrating, and underperforming first sections of their season rise up and win. The first one was Leah Pruitt, and this one is Tony Schumacher. Joe Maynard and his son raised their hands and celebrated victory. Todd Okahara smiles, and it is craziness as Summer, Tony's wife, jumping up and down. Let's go to the top end. Jamie Howe, it has to be Bedlam down there.
Well, for Robert Hight, he's been here before 6 times this season. In fact, in 8 finals. Robert, we talk about dominance all the time, but you said you're going to have to bring it for JR, and you did that. You are 50 at the tree. These moments of perseverance, how much sweeter does it make it?
It's unbelievable. I plunked it in a little. He's a good driver. You got to do what you got to do in the final. But this Auto Club Chevy, man, to have 6 wins at this point in the year, I am blown away. But you know what? Up until a couple races ago, this Auto Club Chevy did not have the best hot weather setup. And today to do this, low ET every single round. So proud of my guys. We got to thank Cornwell, Power Solar. Frank Teagues was here with Flavor Pack. This is amazing. Gonna go to Norwalk next weekend and go to the match race. Then I'm gonna go do a little shooting before we get to Topeka.
Yeah. Congratulations.
And Robert is a world-class shot.
Tony.
As Tony Schumacher gets out of his race car, a winner for the first time in nearly 2 calendar years. The funny car standings show Robert Hight leading the field by 228 points. Good gravy. Everybody else is fighting to just simply maintain their position or make incremental changes from that, let's call it 4th through that 6th area on the top 10 lineup. It is now time to talk to Tony Schumacher, a winner for the 86th time in his career.
It might be the 86th Wally of his career, Brian, but it is the first for the Maynard family racing team, his first since back in 2020. Everything that you've been through, all of the changes, how is this one different?
Well, it's fantastic. For Joe and Kathy Maynard, it's their first victory, It's a beautiful thing. But kids, listen to me. That's adversity. We were awful for a long time. We dug deep. We worked hard. Never give up attitude. We don't put blame on anyone. We work and work and work. And for Okuma, Skag Power Equipment, and the Maynard family, you know, DSR, all the people that worked so hard to get to this point. We love you, man. Honestly, NHRA, 140-degree racetrack, and we still went right down that racetrack. I was terrified because the car was shut off, coasting, and I knew she was going to come around me. Man, that's a car. That car is fantastic, and Brittany's driving like a true champion. So what a monster race, man. No pun intended, but great race. Awesome trophy, 86, man. Kids back home, we love you. We'll see you in the morning.
To get here, though, Tony, you had to pedal it in the semifinals. The experience that you bring to the table, how does that help this new team that you're with this year?
It gives them the confidence that they can do what, you know, they can push it, you know, and that's the thing. They told me before that, they go, you got to have a few lucky rounds in there, and we've had a lot of really poor luck this year. So I told them, I says, I'm not sure we can do anything wrong today. We got a whole lot of good luck sitting in a bank. We got to be able to use it. Not sure what that run was. Don't really know what happened, but that wind light came on, and I was coasting with 2 parachutes out. So at the end of the day, Wally's a Wally, man. We love it. Put this one on the shelf. It's going to shine. Well, I guess it's not going to go on my shelf. I'm pretty sure. Who cares? I'm holding it. Oh yeah, dear love. And you know the Maynards are going to love this one sitting in their shop.
Congratulations.
Now let's take a look at the top fuel standings. Brittany Force leading Mike Salinas by 75 points now. Justin Ashley, Steve Torrance maintaining position 3rd and 4th, as did Josh Hart in 5th. Leah Pruitt sitting 6th, Sean Langdon 7th. Coletta, Austin Brock, and Clay Milliken making up the 8, 9, and 10 positions. Yes, even with that victory, Tony Schumacher has not cracked the top 10, but he's a whole lot closer than he was when this day started. One more look at Robert Heights taking the victory in Nitro Funny Car over J.R. Todd. And again, the DHL team really stepping up the performance here.
Yeah, you're talking about 2 completely different bodies, body styles, engineering, Chevy versus Toyota, and both of them ran near identical times to the 1,000-foot.
276 miles an hour apiece at the 8th mile within a handful of thousandths. And we watched Tony Schumacher's 86th victory. Coasting to the finish line, he said terrified, trapped in the race car with no horsepower. And now it's time for the Sunoco Winner's Circle. The Corbell is going to fly at the top end. The Coughlin family represented, Tony Schumacher in there, and Robert Height. How about that? You have 2 of the winningest drivers in history and a guy that just picked up his first Camping World Series professional level win. This has been an incredible drag race. The Flavor Pack NHRA Northwest Nationals have set the stage not only for the end of the Western Swing, but for what remains of our season. Topeka, Kansas is coming up in just 2 weeks. Saturday and Sunday qualifying coverage, and then 2 p.m. Eastern on FS1 Sunday, as we're going to watch the action on August 14th. On behalf of Jamie Howe, on behalf of Tony Pedregon, I'm Brian Lones. Thanks for following us on the Western Swing. We'll see you on FS1 in 2 weekends.